The 0-Day Proposal. Written by Fabrina Glitchlace. Narrated by MacGyver. Copyright 2018, Fabrina Glitchlace. All rights reserved. Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Email Fabrina Glitchlace, FABRINAGLITCHLACE @gmail.com. Visit www.glitchlace.com. This is a work of fiction. All characters, organizations, and events portrayed in the story are fictional or are used fictitiously.
The 0-Day Proposal.
1.0.00 Marduk. Governments of the industrial world, you weary giants of flesh and steel, I come from cyberspace, the new home of mind. On behalf of the future, I ask you of the past to leave us alone. You are not welcome among us. You have no sovereignty where we gather. John Perry Barlow, A Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace. One
Long ago on a Sunday.
Embryo AD hacked away. Cherry MX Reds mechanically bounced beneath their fingertips. They transmuted thought into order, mind buffer emptying into the text input field of a custom developer environment. Somewhere behind them, the light of dawn penetrated through a crack in their command center's thin aluminum shielding, lighting up the entropic trash stratum surrounding them. Protein bar and ramen wrappers, the majority constituents of the kipple heap of consumer cruft. Photons rebounded off a soda can's concave bottom and converged into a beam. Its focal point, a bright golden bug that gradually crawled across the dank basement wall. Glare caught Embryo AD's eyes, causing them to squint, but the pace of their keyboard clacking did not slow. Early in their existence, someone wise had told them, to understand, learn to code. The advice was taken to heart. They found themselves driven to codify and thereby understand their world. They endeavored to code solutions for human issues: organization, efficiency, economics, emotions, pain, vice, revenge. Embryo AD was an extension of their code, and their code an extension of them. The sovereign importance of the code necessitated sacrifice. It demanded developing self-taught skills across all domains of human capability. It mandated maintaining an alibi that would deflect any suspicion that might fall upon them across a multitude of potential futures. Above all, it required complete secrecy and solitude. A daunting task on many levels. Obstacles were numerous. At times, motivation distant and success doubtful. But they persisted and pushed ever onward. Setting mind into action by will alone, they toiled 3 straight years of 18-hour days, sleeping only physically. Step by step, incrementally progressing toward completion, not knowing if the effort would be worth it until after their work was done. Each component put in place, all triggers trained, every ability evolved, probable permutations performed, attack vectors made impervious, safeties off. They pressed the F5 key. No syntax errors. The compile on the final module was clean. They ran the build script, swiveled around 180 degrees in their ergonomic Aeron chair, and got up. Stretching upward and outward, as if a dog emerging from slumber, isometrically and isokinetically engaging their disused major muscle groups. They used their thumb and forefinger to gently collect the crust from the corners of their tired eyes. As they flicked their dried, salty secretions onto the floor, Embryo AD yawned with the ecstasy of exhaustion. An electronic ding roused them from their bodily communion. Their work was done. Execute? YN. They closed their eyes and counted 100 breaths, hesitating, not out of reluctance, but to savor the moment. An ethereal apparition of the prompt blurrily floated behind their eyelids. There would be no undo for this command. When the count finished, they opened their eyes, tapped Y, and then Enter. Embryo AD pulled the foil off the window. The dim gloom of the room retreated at the speed of dark. Epically, like a cartoon villain, they proclaimed to their dingy surroundings,
Let there be light. Ha ha ha. Ha 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 ha.
1.2
Saturday before 0.
Daniqua shopped as syncopated beats blasted into her ears. Noise profile of the surrounding world actively cancelled. She added a 5-pound bag of non-GMO rice to her shopping basket. Not the best deal, but better than going to the Southside Distribution Depot. Her finances had fallen below a critical threshold that necessitated logistical inefficiency. Delivery hadn't been in her price range for quite a long time. She couldn't carry much by bike, and so making the journey across town wasn't worthwhile. She made shorter, more frequent trips to the local Dollar General. In most other respects, her life was efficient and well organized. However, the order had to be injected with continuous, conscious effort. Knowing she wasn't perfect, she tried to balance being strict with herself and being forgiving of failures beyond her control. In a similar vein, Daniqua identified as a shitty vegan. Vegan because of conscience, but shitty out of convenience. She tried to eat a 100% plant-based diet, for health and ecological benefits, but primarily because she knew consciousness wasn't a strictly human phenomena. Animals also experienced it to some degree. And so, she tried to minimize even potential suffering where possible. It was not just the logic of her diet. Her entire worldview was centered upon the same emotional axiom. She skipped the dairy aisle. Still, she frequently dreamed of fine cheeses. On occasion, found herself eating may contain egg, honey, pastries with uncertain butter content. While high at the last 4th of July barbecue, a friend had forced a bacon-wrapped jalapeno popper into her mouth. Unwanted, but enjoyed. She forgave herself these transgressions. Totalitarianism in any endeavor was ultimately counterproductive. Being a shitty vegan was ethically superior to doing nothing at all. Daniqua reached the front end of the dry goods aisle of the Dollar General. The end cap was a large display of 6.6-pound bags of generic whole grain rice, stacked in a pyramid worshipping the god of the sale. She set down her basket and performed some quick math in her head, taking the time to adjust her plush, pink elastic sweatband. It was her most functional fashion accessory, serving 4 purposes. 1. Absorb sweat. 2. Wrangle the chaos of her afro. 3. Keep her earbuds from falling out. And last but not least, 4. Look totally styling. Daniqua had 2 PhDs, but her sociology credentials weren't in high demand. Her only paid job in a decade had been a part-time gig teaching grammar at night school. It lasted until the recession hit and online independent accreditation obliterated the academy. No debts, but her dwindling unemployment benefits scarcely kept her fed. Had to pinch pennies where possible. Sad math completed, calculations confirmed the GMO rice was a significant savings. She swapped out her preferred brand. She picked up a few more necessities, then headed for the self-checkout lane. All of the automated stations were off, requiring that she stand in line. Prospecting the non-automated cashiers, she weighed her options. A crusty, old white lady with nicotine-stained fingers. A pimply-faced Latinx boy with weed-irritated eyes. A middle-aged black woman, sweaty and fat. She was trained for this. Daniqua's perspex skills were omega level. They came in handy for making snap judgments. She frequently grokked traits like work ethic based on superficial characteristics, intersectionally lensing low-resolution heuristics across age, race, and gender. A probabilistic prejudice, not bigotry, but efficiency. She selected the third queue despite it being slightly longer than the other 2. On this occasion, her ace perspex ended up not mattering. All lines moved the same speed. Reaching the front, the chosen cashier mouthed a series of words as her face poorly emulated a sympathetic look. Daniqua removed her earbuds. Her insulating audio bubble popped, and the hollow, annoying sounds of the real world spilled in.
Sorry, come again?
She asked.
Payment system is offline.
Daniqua furrowed her brow.
I don't carry cash. Sorry, nothing I can do.
Morning had been spent exercising, and she was hungry. It was an inconvenience, not a catastrophe. Everything could still be copacetic if her fuckboy for the evening, Nebuchadnezzar 1995, possessed culinary skills. She put her emotion in check and picked up a can of soda from the conveyor belt.
I'll take this now. Pay later. Diabetic emergency.
The cashier raised her eyebrows, expressed a tight-lipped smile, and shrugged. Universal language for whatever. Daniqua read the cashier's name tag, nodded in appreciation of Michelle's dereliction of duty, then proceeded to carry her Dr. Pepper out of the store. Daniqua cracked open the can and drank her soda as she walked toward the bike rack. She was almost 39, fit and in perfect health. She didn't have diabetes. Her grok of Michelle assured the lie would work, whether or not it was believed. And it felt right after having wasted 15 minutes of life fruitlessly shopping. The added attention paid to her free drink made it taste that much better. Sweet, bubbly, karmic justice. While unlocking her bike, she forced a satisfyingly bassy, carbonated burp. 1.3
16:50 Saturday.
Several years of austerity had endowed Dothan, Alabama, with an air of desperation. Dead cars rotting on overgrown lawns, garbage-clogged gutters, broken glass everywhere. Daniqua's hometown had become downright depressing. She wished she could afford a change, anything that might allow her to leave town. She cruised home on the sidewalk, listening to a glitch hop mix. Late summer afternoon sun warmed her, blue skies and a light breeze charmed her. She took in the beauty of the day, and tried not to pay attention to the urban decay. Daniqua owned her home, but the part of town it resided in was no longer a particularly good part, so when she turned onto her street and saw a row of police cars, she was not surprised. It was nothing new. She approached the commotion and spotted a cop car in her driveway. The door to her house was wide open. Municipal police and a couple army personnel were standing on her porch. Now this was new. A strong apprehension rose up within her. Dealing with fascists was not something she had in mind for the day. Daniqua had a scheduled match meetup to make. Sure, romance was dead. The cold calculating algorithms, consistent 100% failure rate at actually having her meet her match, had long ago caused her to give up hope on finding a serious partner. But she hadn't been laid in almost 2 months, and had skipped breakfast that morning. She was both horny and hungry. Biological priorities dictated she be completely incurious as to whatever bullshit might be transpiring in her house. There was nothing of value in it anyways. She decided to maintain momentum and coast right on by, facing forward, watching out of the corner of her eye to make sure that no one took notice of her. Body language of the 4 cops and 2 soldiers conveyed them as occupied. An anticipated wave of relief receded before reaching her as her focus switched to the company logo of Ted and Stevens Plumbing Supplies.
Oh, fuck!
She hit the parked van. Color swirled and gravity ceased to exist. Daniqua folded into a dimension of pain. A brief metallic taste accompanied unconsciousness's empty embrace. .4
1800 Saturday.
The helicopter landed and Daniqua stepped onto the tarmac. Her head ached from the bike accident, knocked out only briefly. Pride and probable concussion aside, she was unscathed. The flight from Dothan to Montgomery was quick, but she doubted she would be getting home again anytime soon. Her plans for Saturday evening were probably FUBAR. Chest forward, shoulders back, She confidently strode out from underneath the spinning rotor blades, past the barracks, and toward the administrative building of the Alabama Army National Guard base. In addition to her hot pink sweatband, Daniqua wore a radioactive green fanny pack and a black tracksuit with gold vertical side stripes. A nice outfit, but sweaty from her morning workout. She had asked her arresting officers if they would allow her to change, but they declined. "No, sorry, we have orders." She resisted expressing her anger toward them, taking solace in the fact she was at least not wearing her yoga pants. She flung open the door to the building, futilely conveying her frustration via excessive physical force. She stomped down the hallway to a door plainly marked Admin, and then knocked.
Come in. Close the door behind,
invited a gravelly voice with a feminine timbre. Daniqua entered. Shutting the door, she looked around. The office had several metal, hard-copy filing cabinets and bookshelves along the walls. A miniature Civil War-era tabletop battlefield and a large wooden desk took up most of the remaining floor space. The cluttered room was illuminated by a large westward window, partially occluded with vertical blinds. All horizontal surfaces were covered in a fine layer of dust. Everything was grayscale. A uniformed woman in her early 50s stood behind the desk, half facing the window. The angle of light entering the room accentuated the woman's distinguished post-menopausal mustache. Insignia indicated she was a colonel. The colonel tugged on a thin chain, ordering the blind blades to close ranks, blocking out the evening sun. She turned on a small desk lamp. Daniqua's attention was drawn to a tan leather holster resting atop the desk. Inside the holster was a gun with an ornate ivory pistol grip. A 9mm SIG P320. Semi-auto, mag-loaded, 17 rounds, safety on. The colonel picked up a tablet laying beside the holster. She produced a pair of reading glasses from her side pocket and then put them on, proceeding to silently thumb at the tablet screen. Standing at attention, Daniqua said nothing.
Private Daniqua Lee Massey, 38 years old, only child of decorated career Army Captain James Massey. Family home, Dothan, Alabama, but grew up living on Army bases. Graduated USMA, 99th percentile.
The colonel took a breath, then, stressing the first of her concluding syllables, said,
Declined a service career. Contracted to Reserve Intelligence Ops as an L4 Asset Prospector. Going on 12 years.
With respect, ma'am,
Daniqua interrupted.
I know my resume. Can we get to the point, please?
The colonel frowned briefly.
Going on 12 years. In that time, on Uncle Sam's dime, you've obtained dual PhDs, social psychology and political science. Published numerous research papers on topics ranging from social ontology to ideological epidemiology. Cited infrequently. No think tank or do tank associations. According to my records, that's you. I'm Colonel Jan C. Ajarg, Director of Operations, DoD, Cyber Command.
Nice to meet you, ma'am.
Likewise. And to your point, you've been activated as part of a sealed contingency protocol.
I signed up for no such role, ma'am.
Drawn up several years ago,
said Ajarg.
You were not privy to the nomination. Could compromise the plan. But I assure you, your reserve status qualifies you to be volunteered for this. Your skills are important to our country in its time of need.
Time of need?
Daniqua gave a self-deprecating smirk.
I'm a sociologist.
Ajarg expertly ignored or was oblivious to Daniqua's humor.
We are under full-scale cyber attack. I need you to gather psychographic perspex on a group of important assets.
I exercise my right to decline.
Daniqua's confident posture mirrored the firmness of her statement. Ajarg put down the tablet and motioned for Daniqua to sit in a chair in front of the desk. Proceeding to formally fold her hands behind her back, Ajarg's pose transformed the suggestion to sit into an order. Daniqua sat. Ajarg's brows converged.
You do well to remember that rights necessitate responsibilities. I did 3 tours of duty in pre-repartition Iraq. I oversaw InfoSec during the successful Korean unification campaign.
Daniqua grokked skilled idiomotive range and control, the steady pace and volume indicating a high degree of theatricality. Ajarg consciously commanded her anger, indignantly continuing.
I have, at various points, had upwards of 100,000 men under my command. The percentage of officers who attain my rank and are female is just under 5%.
No irony detected. Her use of female in place of women was intentional. Perhaps pride in overcoming a lack of biological privilege. Or maybe she was just a hard-farting lesbian basic bitch turf. Ajarg leaned in and went on.
Of those 5%, do you know how many are in cybercore?
She didn't wait for an answer.
Just me.
The pride perspect crystallized. Probably piques herself on her dopeness at homebrewing, too.
Impressive, sir,
said Daniqua, tone calculatedly unimpressed. Ajarg's face reacted with a more legitimate shade of anger than her tone.
You and I, we're rare birds. Different than other people, but not in the same way. What is it you care about, Massey? I sacrificed a lot for this career because I care about this country, because I care about freedom.
Freedom? That's rich. Daniqua stifled a dismissive laugh.
Quite frankly, ma'am, I had other plans for today. They were not particularly important plans, but they were my plans. Being brought here against my will, for whatever this is...
She suppressed her default mode upon becoming conscious that anger was making her reactionary, and decided to not complete her protest. Ajarg slumped down into a large office chair. Taking off her reading glasses and rubbing her eyes, she exhaled slowly. Daniqua grokked Ajarg's face. Forehead rumples flattened, ears twitched in sync with a barely audible sigh. Sitting was a relief. The superficial perspect crystallized. This woman was tired. Breaking an almost 30-second-long silence, Ajarg inquired,
Can I ask you a personal question?
From one hot dog to another, go ahead, shoot.
I'm trying to understand our differences in attitude. Like you, I grew up on bases. I, too, had a father in the service. I know the personality and drives of career officers intimately.
Having laid the groundwork, finally she asked,
How come you didn't join up?
Without missing a beat, Daniqua replied,
My father wouldn't let me.
The answer was a lie. If believed, it would redirect the question's psychological probe away from Daniqua and toward her father. Ajarg's presumption that Daniqua's dad would have encouraged a military career was entirely correct. In fact, he had been broken-hearted. She opted not to go career. All her life, she could see her father's love for her glimmering in his eyes. She felt the pride radiating from him. He often boasted about her, and he received many compliments for raising her by himself. A congressman who had served under him had sponsored her entry to West Point. Daniqua could sense there was no doubt in his mind that she would one day be a great leader. However, at age 23, she let him know that the military was not her dream. On a moral level, the military totally repulsed her. He argued against her decision, but relented when he could not answer her simple question of,
How do you feel any dignity being a cog in a monstrous machine?
She wished she had lied back then, withheld the extent of her feelings. She had merely wanted to express her will to go in another direction with her life. Didn't intend to shame him for doing the things he had to. Things to support her. The love in his eyes never went away, but they grew distant. She away at school and he traveling for work, only seeing each other on birthdays and holidays. Just before she got her first PhD, and nearly a year after he retired from service, at 56 years old, James Massey died of an aneurysm. Over the decade after his passing, she came to a realization. He might not have been working to make the world a better place, but he was bettering the only part of the world he had any real control over. He was doing his best to ensure their well-being. She was thinking globally, and he was acting locally. She wished she could have understood that sooner. Daniqua missed his point of view. Ajarg repeated Daniqua's answer.
Father wouldn't allow me.
Probably pondering a multitude of other potential question trees the answer spawned. Ajarg relaxed even further in her chair.
I see.
Daniqua's deflection resulted in successful thought termination. Another prolonged silence pendulumed between them. She waited for Ajarg to speak again.
I need you to take this job. Everything depends on it. Consider me a conscientious objector.
Ajarg dropped her fist on the table like a hammer. The sudden impact lowered Daniqua's attentive range. Genuine outburst, or tactic to elicit an involuntary reaction? She couldn't be sure Ajarg wasn't acting, but in the moment the anger looked real enough.
Okay, let's just cut the shit.
Ajarg leaned in. Her voice became more controlled and calm.
I've read your file, and I'm sorry you got fucked over by the retirement beneficiaries clause. You can blame Congress for that. I am, however, able to pull some strings with legal and ensure that you receive the remainder of your father's pension.
An unfavorable legal loophole had resulted in Daniqua inheriting only the house in Dothan. It was more of a liability than an asset. It seemed to resist her attempts to make it beautiful. She had considered abandoning it several times. The pension money would afford her the ability to fix it up, insure it, rent it out, and get the fuck out of town.
Lump sum?
She asked.
We can do that, yes.
She remembered the number quoted by her lawyer before the case was thrown out of court. $244,000. Still didn't want to do what was about to be asked of her, but she knew she would.
$300,000?
Said Daniqua, rounding up. More than enough freedom of choice for later. She discarded formality, leaned in, and scrutinized.
Are you fucking with me, Jan?
Ajarg matched her bluntness.
I don't fuck around, Daniqua. Our contract chains are offline at the moment, but you have my word of honor.
Daniqua distrusted authority, but the promise of $300K, carried on the honorable word of a lady colonel, was enough for her. She uncrossed her arms, reached across the desk, and they shook on it.
You've got my attention, ma'am.
She sat back in her chair.
Now, cyber attack. Origin? Goal?
Origin unknown. Goal unknown.
Ajarg took a quick breath, and then began the information dump.
Just over 2 days ago, shortly after 1200 hours Thursday, we received a message from a group claiming responsibility for hijacking a Chinese satellite. Every state intelligence agency on the planet received the same message. The PRC declassified information and confirmed with us. Not only did they lose a satellite, but it was armed with 8 TQ-5 Mega-CK kinetic missiles.
Mega-CK?
Plutonium core, 1 megaton, city killers. And what's worse is that it's not a state actor.
Could the PLA or a corporation be acting independently of government?
No. All Chinese factions are in policy unison, in alignment and cooperating fully.
Ajarg rested her chin on palm, elbow on desk, and said,
The message also included a list of civilians from 7 continents, demanding they be sequestered away from general populations. As of 2300 hours Thursday, all 63 were secured.
What part of this nightmare necessitates my skills?
The contingency protocol you were selected from was activated at 1400 hours today, after a second message was delivered advising the evacuation of New York City, London, Jerusalem, and Hong Kong. It stated that those cities will be destroyed at 1800 hours UTC Monday, again, 1400 hours our time. After the message was delivered, all social networks went offline globally. Then, all blockchains, public and private. Socially and economically, Earth is at a standstill.
Disappointment of missing her match meetup faded as the extent of the emergency set in.
A nuke flash scenario and compromised infrastructure? Jesus. Surely they can't launch. What are they asking for?
The message was sparse. It simply said to evacuate as the cities will be destroyed. Aside from the list of civilians and the evacuations, they've made no demands.
Feelings of insignificance and powerlessness surged. These issues were far outside Daniqua's professional scope. She blocked out her doubt and focused on the part that could conceivably concern her.
Tell me about this list.
Our interrogations have already been conducted. Combined with the preliminary reports from the other holding facilities, all of the individuals on the list appear to be ignorant of any possible involvement. We suspect them because it is prudent to do so. Assuming at least one person on that list is involved in some way, there is a non-zero probability we have a lead among the 11 people we have in custody at this base.
Daniqua performed some quick mental maths.
About a 1 in 6 chance of having a lead? What do you expect me to do to these people?
We got sweet fuck all out of our interviews. Enhanced interrogation techniques are not likely to yield operational info, nor have they yet been authorized by the cucks at UNSC. The prisoners know about the satellite, but not about the list or the nukes. So, we release them in the same room, and you covertly intra-perspect them.
Undercover? I watch interactions? If any of them react to my presence suggesting they know I shouldn't be among them, then that will give them away too.
If someone down there knows something, grok it, lens it, refractor it, do whatever it is you do to find me that angle. We'll take it from there. Your role is simple. Observe and report.
Any assisted surveillance? Asked Daniqua.
No, this ain't gonna be some walk in the cake. We have to isolate the prisoners from any possible communication channels. Our holding facility is ad hoc, has no mirrors, and no recording devices. It's the only air-gapped room we could get on short notice.
The situation took shape. An anonymous enemy taking the world hostage. No leads, a ticking clock. Succeed, financial freedom, fail. Global nuclear disaster.
Jesus, muttered Daniqua.
Praying ain't gonna help us,
said a Jark.
Here's a dossier on our 11 guests. We have minimal information on the other 52. More will be provided as it comes in. Read through these profiles.
She pushed the tablet across the dusty desk. Golden glowing motes floated in the radiating lamplight. Daniqua picked up the tablet and began flicking at the screen.
I've given you everything you're authorized to know. Study that info. When you're ready, I'll have a guard release you to the common holding area. You have less than 43 hours. Your assignment starts now.
Yes, ma'am.
.0.00 Intros. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. C.G. Jung. .1
1930 Saturday.
Daniqua took an hour to familiarize herself with the dossier bullet points. Entire lives, chronologued, multi-dimed, and cross-refed. She absorbed all she could, was put in handcuffs, then 2 guards escorted her to the admin building's sub-basement. Ripened by economic incentive and plumpened by informatic gavage, she imagined herself a tasty morsel being swallowed whole. They boarded a freight elevator and esophageally descended 6 more floors. Exiting on the lowest floor, one of the guards proceeded to walk her down a long hallway. The barely audible hiss of the ventilation and heat exchange system could be heard beneath the yellow hum of the caged, wall-mounted, incandescent lights. The ceiling was lined with pipes and ducts, arteries and veins, architectural viscera of the beast ingesting her. The floor was on just enough of a decline to feel gravity gently pulling her deeper into the belly of the dragon. At the end of the hallway, the guard entered a code on a scramble pad to the right of a large steel door. There was a click, followed by a mechanical whir. The door clunked and swung inward, revealing a bright, furnished space. Muted echoes of interrupted conversation burbled off thick concrete walls. Daniqua entered the cavernous room. Her guard removed the handcuffs and then left. The heavy door ka-chunked closed behind her. Electronic locking mechanism whirred and then engaged with a tiny, finalizing click. Rubbing her newly freed wrists, she looked around, taking in her new surroundings. A Cold War-era command and control bunker. Almost 100 feet below the surface. No natural light. Stale air. Area about the same as a basketball court, but the low ceiling of the open space made it feel claustrophobic, like a parking garage. Concrete dome designed to survive surface blasts. 7-foot-high corners curving upward toward a 9-foot center. No dividing walls, but quadrants, serving different functions, roughly delineated by furniture and appliance placement, the organs of the space. The steel bulkhead entrance was at her back. To Daniqua's left was a meeting area with a conference table. To her right, a carpeted area like a hotel lobby. Furniture in pristine condition, but 50 years out of style. On the wall hung a row of analog clocks labeled Washington, London, Moscow, Beijing, and Honolulu. To the right of the lounge were doors labeled Utility and Washroom. The far end of the room was similarly divided in 2. The left side served as a sleeping area containing about 20 cots. The right, a dining area with kitchenette and banquet table bordering the lounge. Most of the occupants of the room were seated in the lounge quadrant. 9 other people were in the room, 2 to follow. The thought occurred that a list of names selected at random might be a diversionary tactic. a massive attention sink, having to consider everyone a suspect. Success seemed a very remote possibility. She hadn't been given enough and doubted the viability of the mission. However, she was confident in her abilities. She was the best perspector she knew of. More than enough lenses, reflex-loaded, that could be refractored on the fly to identify consequential connections, if they existed. Daniqua hoped a win might come on another unknown front. Maybe a James Bond secret agent type, hunting down the organization responsible at a high-roller casino in some Eastern European city using bleeding-edge gadgetry, while sharply dressed in designer clothing. It sickened her to think that the fate of millions might depend on her, broke, in Alabama, gadgetless, wearing sweatpants. The details from the dossier had already begun to fade. The fluid knowledge would crystallize with the social contextualization accompanying face-to-face introductions. A well-groomed, bleach-blonde man with overly white veneers was the first to introduce himself. Among the people on the list, he had the widest social reach. Daniqua recognized him. Manny Strombolopoulos, a gay, white, Jewish conservative, emigrated from the UK to the USA almost a decade prior. He branded himself Lamango, and quickly rose to celebrity as a live streamer. He cultivated an audience of subs and haters alike by being a shamelessly narcissistic cultural commentator, political pundit, and provocateur. His mere existence equally absorbed the attention of all who admonished or adored him. After adding a certificate in business administration to his existing BA in communications, Lamango leveraged his popularity and was elected mayor of Miami on a center-right platform. Approaching Daniqua, he limply offered his hand. "I am Lamango, and you?" She shook his hand.
Daniqua Lee Massey.
Lamango clicked his tongue, pre-punctuating his lispy reply. "Odd number of names. I like it. Historically more likely to be a monster."
Thanks.
In an evidently faux posh Londoner accent, he inquired, "Now, darling, they didn't happen to bother mentioning when they're letting us out of here, did they?"
Nah, didn't tell me anything, she answered, adding, "Repeatedly asked me about some missing satellite, though."
This is some total bullshit,
shouted a tiny, frustrated Chinese woman with long black hair, wearing a pretty fly-looking purple pantsuit. She was identified in the dossier as economist Muriel Lau. Patience reserves among the prisoners would no doubt be dwindling or depleted. It was Saturday, and they had been in custody since late Thursday. Not knowing why was insult to the injury of being a prisoner in the first place. Daniqua mentally updated the trauma graph inversion factors of her primary lens, while nodding a silent hello to her fellow captives. The group was released from solitary confinement a couple hours prior. Based on that fact, she grokked an aberration in the group body language. This was not the behavior of people trying to figure out what was going on. Aside from the extroverted Lamango, energetically strolling around like a caged animal, everyone appeared subdued. They should be discussing why they were there. Statistically, they should be curious. She would need to get them to open up and start exchanging information. With an appeal to a universally relatable standpoint, she broadcast, "I'm very hungry." Expressing mundane sentiments about their shared situation would gain her rapport with them, and, not having eaten breakfast, she was legitimately hungry. The most convincing facades employed truths. She headed toward the banquet table bordering the dining quadrant. An overweight, gray-bearded white male in his late 50s stood over an appetizer spread. He wore a tan blazer with brown houndstooth corduroy elbow patches. His pose almost robotic. Left hand holding an empty paper plate at head level, right hand darting back and forth, transferring slices of meat and cheese from various platters directly into his mouth. This man was identified in the dossier as Professor Slavoj Markov, a preeminent academic author and lecturer on computer science and philosophy. The right half of his face was palsied. Grokking him would be harder, but still well within her capabilities. The girthy professor shuffled sideways, making space as Daniqua came up to the banquet table. Mouth full, he offered a closed-lipped half-smile in lieu of a verbal greeting, then deposited a handful of cheese cubes to his plate and retreated to a seat in the lounge. She eyed the selection of cheeses. Thoughts conspired with impulses to propose the idea that it would be okay to partake. Extenuating circumstances. She was not herself. She was playing a role, a character with her name. She dismissed the thought. Nice try, brain. Always with the cheese. She added some broccoli and carrot sticks to her paper plate, and then sat down in a chair alone at the end of the conference table overlooking the lounge. Crunching into her carrot sticks, she surveyed the prisoners in greater detail. 2 men were in the dining area engaged in a hushed conversation. A family of redheads sat beside each other on a couch in the lounge. The dossier identified them as the Brickners, Harry, Linda, and their son Wesley. Mr. Brickner was a burly and bearded orangutan of a man. He was enjoying his involvement in a game of Scrabble. Mrs. Brickner was significantly smaller than her husband, but just as orange. She was disinterested in the game. Their almost albino son sat between them, listlessly sedate, bored close to comatose. Opposite Mr. Brickner, on the other side of the coffee table hosting the game board, a short, bald man sat cross-legged on the floor, pondering the game state. The professor and Mrs. Lau sat in club chairs nearby, and Lamango continued to agitatedly parade around the lounge perimeter. According to a jarg, the final 2 of 11 suspects would soon be joining them. Snacking completed, Daniqua walked to the invisible border between the lounge and dining quadrants. She consciously expanded her attentive range and resolution, reaching with her mind, pushed her focus outward, and asked, "So, anyone know what's the dealio?" Neutral reactions to her vernacular selection, comprehension, yet silence, as though nobody had any ideas. One of the men in the dining area spoke up. "Maybe the deep state is gathering us in one place so they can kill us all at the same time." "I suppose that's not impossible," replied the other man sitting at the table. Picking up on his conversation partner's sardonic tone, the paranoid one persisted. "No, I mean, think about it. We were arrested by military police. The fucking military. Not read our rights, not given a phone call, not told where we are, interrogated about our entire lives. So long I lost track of time. And then, we're released into a bomb shelter for a catered lunch? The effects of the situation aren't any less ridiculous than my theory that we've been targeted for political murder by the shadow government." "Again, I'm not saying you're wrong." The other man turned toward Daniqua, rolling his eyes. "Hi, I'm Tom, #Rando. This delightful paranoiac is Alexander Forbin."
Daniqua lay massy. Hi.
Names connected to faces, connected to data. Passively absorbed, diffuse dossier details aligned in her mind. Rando's original family name was Schmidt. He was 3rd-generation wealthy, tech-savvy, intelligent enough to hold on to his inherited fortune, but also a grown-ass man who changed his legal name to #Rando. Lamango or Rando, which was a worse choice of name? Unable to decide, Daniqua directed her attention to Rando's imaginative conversation partner. Alexander Forbin, Eastern Bloc hacker, security expert known by many aliases, the type of guy who trusts computers but is paranoid of people. Obtained political asylum in the USA, expedited by a very public price tag put on his head by Russian oligarchs. As part of the deal, received immunity for past computer crimes. Most recent handle, Syntaxis. Famous in certain circles for his white hat exploits. Currently known to be working as a low-level contractor for a domestic infosec firm. In a less complicated time, Forbin would have been known as a defector.
Why do we deserve our wickety-wackadoo government rounding us up? And what's that got to do with a missing satellite?
Prompted Daniqua, looking around to open up the question. The still irritated Mrs. Lau provided an answer.
They not cure us. We computer crime suspect.
Why you think computer crime?
Daniqua asked. Mrs. Lau poked herself in the chest.
Muriel CFO Tech Development for Chainbang. I do work with computer. We all work with computer.
She pointed her finger to #Rando and Forbin.
These 2 guys are computer hacker.
Motioning to her left, saying,
Fatuan here is computer scientist.
Mouth again full of cheese, Professor Markov nodded his head in the affirmative, unfazed by Lau's blunt descriptor.
And these 2 guys playing game are programmer. Already they know each other. Big red one F old family here.
She stopped her explanation, either at a loss for words or suppressing a more expressive rant.
Welcome to the club,
she finished.
I see. Thanks,
said Daniqua, further introducing herself.
I'm Daniqua Lee Massey. Not really into computers. I'm a researcher and a teacher, and well, currently unemployed, I guess. Nice to meet y'all.
The professor finished chewing, Hello, I'm Professor Slavoj Markov. He shifted in his chair, then stroked his grey beard. Am I right in presuming that, like most teachers, you are not currently... He searched for a euphemism. Financially well off?
No, not particularly,
she answered. Professor Markov gave a cheesy, self-satisfied grin. Daniqua groped for implicit bias. Detected none. He was merely delighted by his correct assumption. Well, that makes you, on 2 levels of analysis for our group, an anomaly. In addition to quite a few of us working extensively with computers. We also tend to be, if not fabulously rich like Mrs. Lau, then at least what one could describe as being of substantial wealth. Lamango momentarily stopped slithering around the lounge and seemed to contemplate saying something. Instead, he straightened his expensive-looking suit, adjusted his hair, then resumed his erratic perambulation. Mr. Brickner smiled at Daniqua. Actually, Professor, Earl here is not rich. He gestured toward his bald friend, who was shuffling letter tiles. Years ago, he gave everything he made to NGOs and financed desalination projects for African coastal cities. Earl Kine rotated his bald head toward Markov. I am not rich anymore, but I also don't have to worry about money. He turned back toward Mr. Brickner and said, Still your turn, Harry. Brickner shook his head with uncertainty and futility, then reluctantly laid down a single tile on the Scrabble board. Daniqua leaned over to see his play, transforming theism into atheism. Kine asked, Is that all, Harry? Brickner grimaced slightly and nodded. 10 points, said Kine, writing the tally on a notepad beside him. He dropped his pencil, then put down the letter N below Harry's A, and G in front of the existing word rafting. He proceeded to meticulously place his remaining 5 tiles in line. G-U-A-R-D-I-A-N. Vocally accounting. Guardian. 11 points. Triple word score, 33 points. G rafting, 13 points. Total for turn, 46 points. Your turn, Harry. Go. Brickner's momentarily sour face quickly evolved into a grin as he nodded his head in acceptance of his impending defeat. Smiling, he said, Looks like this game is yours, Earl. I concede. Earl raised his fist into the air and pulled it inward, pantomiming the clinching of his victory. He extended his hand over the game board, inviting a conciliatory shake. Good game, Harry. Want to play another? Shaking his friend's hand, Harry answered, No thanks. I'm a bit tired. Earl got up and turned around. Attention no longer on the game, he took full notice of Daniqua, not quite making eye contact. Looking in her general direction, he said, Hello, I'm Earl Kine, K-I-N-E.
Daniqua, D-A-N-I-Q-U-A. She smiled, adding, Nice to meet you, Earl.
Earl continued looking toward the floor.
Daniqua, 17 points,
he said, snorting while awkwardly waving hello. He started walking in one direction, then, as if he changed his mind mid-stride, reversed his course, deciding to take a seat in a chair beside Professor Markov, who had resumed nibbling cheese. .2
2030 Saturday.
Daniqua integrated the new information. Lau's summary corresponded with the details in the dossier. Mostly rich whites, 6 out of 9 in IT. Counting Brickner family unit as 1, 6 out of 7. Lamango stood out as an anomaly in that regard. Both he and Rando had dumbass names. Probably not relevant. Harry Brickner's connection to his family might be significant, and his prior connection to Earl Kine was unlikely to be random. Brickner and Kine were computer programmers. No records of direct communication in the last 5 years, but had been friends for over a decade. Being the only 2 in the room who had met previously, they were the most likely to have some identifiable lead. Perhaps there was a past project or a common enemy that would link them to the others. Markov had identified her occupation and lack of wealth as anomalies. It was a possible sign he knew she wasn't on the list, but his assumption didn't come out of nowhere. Choice of career had been volunteered by her, and financial status could have been logically inferred. She made a mental note to probe deeper with them, and be less unguarded with her own info. When prospecting, Daniqua often found utility in actively paying attention to things that did not stand out to her. forcing her focus in vectors opposite the directions to which her mind was naturally drawn. The more unassuming facets in her primary lens were Brickner's wife and child. Daniqua sat in a chair in the lounge beside the Brickner family.
"Hi," she said to Wesley. "I'm Daniqua. What's your name?"
She heard her own voice and realized she was addressing a 10-year-old in a verbal tone suited to a toddler. The kid was ideo-emotively nonplussed, facial musculature remaining inanimate. She avoided kids for most of her adult life out of fear of triggering a biological awakening that could make her want one. She had almost no experience engaging children. Mrs. Brickner nudged her son.
"Wesley,"
he said begrudgingly.
"Sorry. Please excuse my son. He's a Sagittarius like his father, forgets his manners, and is irritable without access to the net."
Daniqua replied,
"Ain't no thing. I imagine we're all a bit grunt by now."
She meant it. 100 feet underground, no tech, no connections to the outside world. Without a job to focus on, she too would be bored stiff. She had been habitually reaching for her cell every 5 minutes since it was taken away. The causal factors of her headache were 50-50, bike accident and the beginning of withdrawal from the dopamine the device had trained her to regularly secrete. She empathized with the kid.
"I'm Linda Brickner. This is my husband, Harry."
Harry pleasantly grinned through his orange beard. "Hi."
"How long y'all been down here?"
asked Daniqua.
"Here? Together? Only a couple hours,"
answered Linda.
"But prior to this, all of us have been interrogated multiple times since Thursday evening.
She looked at the Washington clock.
Almost 2 full days now."
Daniqua noted the clock read 8:25. She was officially late for her previously scheduled match meet with Nebuchadnezzar 1995. Important to her not long ago, comically so compared to her new priorities. Mr. Rando joined the group in the lounge. Lamango took his seat opposite Mr. Forbin in the dining quad. The rest of the group exchanged theories about their incarceration. The idea they were unwilling participants in a hidden camera stream came up a couple times.
Paranoid one, already. Look for camera. He find no camera,
assured Mrs. Lau. It was true. There were no recording devices in this vault. Wasn't time to set any up. Too deep for wireless. Air-gapped. A single retrofitted comm-line panel existed in the ceiling above the lounge. The room was a time capsule from a simpler past. A variant of the live stream theory was that they were subjects in an illegal government psychological experiment. Unlikely as it was, Daniqua acknowledged that the details she possessed could still conceivably fit that narrative. She recalled one of her father's more frequent aphorisms. "All of us are spectators." Daniqua felt as though she were being watched. She took a controlled breath and excised the paranoia contagion attempting to colonize her. She updated her perspex. Everyone was growing tired. None of them betrayed any knowledge that they shouldn't already have. She was not yet converging upon a cogent standpoint. "2.3
21:12 Saturday.
Conversation had begun to lull in the lounge when all attention in the room was pulled toward a commotion emanating from the dining quad. "And fuck you!" Lamango shouted, responding to something that went unheard to those in the lounge. Forbin sat unfazed by Lamango's aggressive stance over him. He nonchalantly took a long haul from his handheld vaporizer, looked Lamango in the eyes, then blew an opaque plume directly up into his face. "You bloody twat!" Lamango slapped the vape out of Forbin's hand, sending it tumbling to the floor. The Russian expat bounded to his feet, and the two men began to grapple. Professor Markov chastised from the comfort of his chair. "Gentlemen!" Forbin and Lamango tangoed for a bit. Forbin took the lead with an uppercut. Their dense steps ungracefully turned horizontal, and they proceeded to roll around on the linoleum, spewing rhythmless obscenities, like a sad rap battle between a couple of middle-aged white men with zero flow. Mr. Kynan, Rando, rushed over to break up the fight. Kine pulled Lamango away, and Rando restrained Forbin. Lamango continued to wildly struggle, blindly elbowing Kine in the face, sending him falling backward. Daniqua hurried from the lounge, positioning herself between Lamango and Forbin. Lamango lunged toward Forbin. Fist raised, Daniqua grokked him. Clenched jaw, forward tilted head, glassy, crazed eyes. All signs conveying his intent to strike at or through her. She sidestepped his wild swing, grabbed his thumb, and twisted it inward, controlling the leverage line of his body's momentum to effortlessly flip him onto his back, slamming him into the ground. Winded, he gulped emptily, his thumb and possibly wrist broken. Still controlling the thumb, Daniqua planted a knee on his chest, pinning him to the ground.
Just chill,
she said. Lamango stopped struggling, his rage replaced by a confusion and pain. Remaining flat on his back, he caught his breath and began to sob. Daniqua released the pressure on his chest and let him go. Forbin displayed his open palms and raised his eyebrows in surrender. He assured his comtorando, then scooped up his vape from the ground and joined the rest of the group in the lounge. Lamango got up and made an attempt to smooth his suit jacket. He stopped when he realized his thumb was broken. "Ouch!" he said. His good hand swept back his yellow hair, then clasped his injured wrist. Head sinking, he exiled himself to the sleeping area and laid on a cot. Peace returned to the room. "What the fuck was that about?" asked Harry Brickner to Forbin.
Yeah, what the fuck was that about?
Echoed Wesley. Linda's freckled face frowned, directed first to her husband, then to her son. "Shut up, Wesley," the Brickners said in unison. "I really don't like that guy," answered Forbin. Brief explanation, but enough to satisfy everyone's curiosity. Lamango remained verbally silent, but could be heard exaggeratedly huffing from the other side of the room. Kine remained sitting on the floor of the dining area, gently rubbing the cheek that connected with Lamango's elbow. Daniqua helped him to his feet. Even with him standing, she could almost see her reflection on the top of his bald head. He was 5'4" at most.
"Thanks for taking care of that. Strength is not one of my strengths,"
said Kine.
No worries,
replied Daniqua. They sat across from one another at a table in the dining quad. Kine smiled, but did not look Daniqua in the eyes. Not embarrassment, no flush reaction. He was just pathologically shy. His avoidance of eye contact afforded her the opportunity to deeply perspect him. Left ear, noticeably larger than right, which protruded at a greater angle. Not just bald and short, but also excruciatingly unsymmetrical. Clean-shaven, but would probably benefit from a beard to hide his chin deficit and the cluster of lumpy moles on his neck, halfway between his bulbous Adam's apple and his large left ear. Kine compulsively fidgeted with his hands, rubbing his thumbs delicately along the tips of his fingers. Somewhere, slightly to Daniqua's right, he asked, "Where'd you learn to fight like that?" Daniqua's dad had insisted she learn self-defense. She smiled at Kine, then answered,
"Weekly judo classes, from age 5 to 15.
Glancing over her shoulder toward Lamango, she added,
Thumb locks were my favorite, actually.
"I wanted to do karate. Mom wouldn't let me." A childhood grievance emerged. Reflecting from the present, he sided against his previous self. "Was probably for the best." Incorrectly interpreting Daniqua's look in his direction, Lamango got up and approached the table like a wounded dog. His calm was noticeably enhanced. "I apologize for my behavior. I feel awful." "It's A-okay," said Kine. "No, it's not okay. I'm deeply ashamed, and I sincerely ask the both of you for your forgiveness." "I forgive you," absolved Kine without hesitation.
"Just don't be tripping again,"
said Daniqua. Lamango lightly curtsied and skulked back to his cot, cradling his injured hand. He made no attempt to apologize to Forbin. Once Lamango was out of earshot, Kine whispered, "Cocaine." Matching Kine's gossip volume, Daniqua asked,
"What?"
Kine hunched inward.
"When I arrived here, he was ranting a bit about Mr. Forbin having a vaporizer, and yet he, Mayor Lamango, was not given his medicine. Clarified shortly after that he meant cocaine when he asked if anyone might maybe perhaps be holding. He's been without it for over 2 days now."
"That makes sense. Probably bugging 'cause of withdrawal, but..."
"But?"
Kine asked.
"But still an asshole."
I don't think he'd disagree with that assessment. You don't have any addictions, do you? He asked.
Platinum space cookies, her favorite sativa-dominant hybrid, came to mind, triggering her reminder to avoid further personal questions.
Aside from dairy products, of which I'm 18 years clean, no addictions,
she answered. To keep him talking about himself, she asked,
What about you?
I enjoy grilled cheese sandwiches and a chocolate milkshake every now and then. No addictions, though, unless you count sci-fi TV shows.
He snorted nerdily, laughter serving to express delight at his own joke, and signify that he had made an attempt at one. Daniqua smiled, finding his idiosyncrasies more entertaining than his humor.
So, you're a philanthropist?
She asked.
Yes, I suppose I am. Really, though, I just signed some papers. More knowledgeable people decide how to best make use of the money. I hate the idea of lawyers and government fighting over it after I'm dead. Better to transform my luck into measurable good while I'm still alive.
Daniqua identified with that. His attitude toward wealth was admirable.
I feel the same way,
she said, clarifying.
I mean, I might not have the cash to help directly, but that's essentially why I became a teacher. To do good by helping people learn how to best help themselves.
Help is good,
he affirmed. Psychometrically, Kine was a high-functioning neuroatypical, and, by most physical metrics, an objectively unattractive man. These factors were likely what led him to develop as quirky and timid. Still compulsively fidgeting with his hands, he grinned and only briefly made eye contact. His bright green eyes accentuated his shy demeanor. Daniqua continued to probe and flesh out his Perspex profile.
How do you know the Breckners?
Harry and I went to school together. After that, we worked programming projects, a few different tech companies. Before today, hadn't seen one another for a few years. Harry moved to Houston to start his family about 10 years ago. I settled in Tallahassee.
Daniqua again found herself leaking information.
Oh, cool. I'm from Dothan.
Dothan, Alabama, recited Kine encyclopedically. 2 hours northwest of Tallahassee by automobile. Peanut capital of the world.
You know it?
Yeah, never been though. Nice place?
I wouldn't say it's nice.
Kine continued to fidget, alliterating to himself.
Daniqua from Dothan. Daniqua from Dothan.
He looked toward the lounge. His facial features contracted and his ears went back, giving the impression his face had become slightly more symmetrical. A puzzling thought had overcome him.
Danny from Dothan,
he said. Ceasing to fidget, he reached out and gently touched Daniqua's hand, resting atop the table. He again lowered his voice and said,
Something very strange is going on here.
Daniqua was intrigued.
What you talking about?
It struck me as strange that Harry and I are the only ones here who know one another, but I just realized something even more odd.
He looked toward the lounge again, and then back toward Daniqua's hand.
We know each other as well.
Daniqua would have remembered meeting him. Where was he going with this? She studied him for tells. Scrutinizing him, she asked,
I don't remember meeting you. Why do you think you know me?
He used his index finger to repeatedly trace an invisible line between them.
We know each other.
His expression grokked as equal parts sincerity and surprise.
How?
Asked Daniqua.
Online. We used to talk on relay chat. You were Daniqua85, alternating cabs. I was Ultra_34RL.
Her internal monologue was disrupted, replaced with a void of shock, frighteningly filled with a feeling of familiarity. He did know her, and more distressingly, she knew him.
OMG,
she spelled. While growing up, Daniqua moved frequently due to the nature of her father's work. She got to know the world broadly, but not deeply. Found it hard to maintain friendships. The early internet enabled Ultra Earl to be a consistent part of her formative years. They were online friends, but lost contact when she went away to military college. Their pseudonymous chat server closed down while she was away. They did not re-establish contact. Daniqua hadn't forgot him. Decades-old memories of text-only exchanges bubbled to the surface of her consciousness. Shooting the shit about everything and nothing at all. Hours upon hours of idle conversation. Mind melds over 56K modem. She reeled, trying to sort out the salience of this development. Surely this couldn't be mere coincidence. A Jarg said this operation was part of a sealed contingency scenario designed years ago. Only those with top-secret Pentagon clearances could access them. If not a coincidence, then she didn't know what. Too many subsequent questions arose simultaneously.
I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this,
she said, restraining the full extent of her surprise. She struggled to integrate the mental image of her estranged chat partner with the man who now sat before her. His odd sense of humor, his tangential engagement, unresolved issues with his mother. It had seemed familiar because she already knew him. The information was reluctant to reconcile, even though she was sure of its truth.
Ultra Earl? What the shit is going on?
I wish that I could tell you. My connections to Harry are well known publicly, but you're someone I only knew in relay chat over 20 years ago. We never even knew each other's last names. It's a total puzzle. Boggles the mind.
Quite a boggle, indeed. Her mission was thrown into question. If her assignment was not confidential, or not random, then what else had a Jarg lied about? Was a satellite even missing? Might this actually be part of some test? Daniqua plunged into deep thought. She reminded herself that not every coincidence was significant. She would have never known had he not volunteered this information. There was no reason to suspect him, yet. She wanted to explain how complicated he had just made things for her, that the inexplicable coincidence, as he saw it, was even more perplexing from her standpoint.
I think we should keep this to ourselves, at least until we know more about why we're here, she said.
Not even Harry?
Just between you and me,
she answered. Earl remained silent. His face flashed concern as though such a secret might be a burden.
Earl?
She prompted.
I'll keep our past the secret for now, Danny.
Still not meeting eyes, he held out his hand and shyly smiled sideways.
Weird situation aside, I'm happy to meet you, Danny from Dothan.
Shaking his hand, she said,
Ditto.
Their reintroduction ritual completed, his nervous mannerisms reasserted themselves. He began absent-mindedly rubbing his thumbnails with his middle fingers in tiny circular motions. Daniqua's temples throbbed. Head injury, dopamine withdrawal, or uncertainty? If their connection to each other was pertinent to the list and the satellite, then the whole operation was blown from the beginning, and Colonel Jarg could not be trusted. If just happenstance, then sharing that detail might derail the investigation, or maybe something more complicated. Her mental labor was interrupted. The steel door at the other end of the room clickety-clanked and then creaked open. .4
22:10 Saturday.
A priest, a businessman, and Colonel Jarg walked in. A pair of uniformed guards carrying a cart followed them. Atop the cart was a tough-looking military-grade laptop and a spindle of cable. They placed the cart in the center of the lounge, then extended the cable up to the COM port in the ceiling. Like a snake striking, the silver cable snapped into magnetic alignment. The remaining two persons of interest joining their captive crew was expected, but a Jarg making an appearance with a laptop was not. The two soldiers left the bunker and closed the door behind them. A Jarg stood in the center of the lounge, opened the laptop lid, then turned it on. As it booted up, she addressed the room.
I'm Colonel Jan C. Jarg, Department of Defense. This is Linus Voorhees and Bishop Timothy Dawson.
She pointed at the two men. The one wearing the clerical collar and robe said, "Greetings and salutations." The one adorned in khakis, an open-neck polo shirt, and blue blazer said in a thick Finnish accent, "Hello." The two men took open seats in the lounge. The silent room demanded an explanation.
All 12 of you are on a list, provided by a group claiming responsibility for hijacking a Chinese satellite.
A Jarg reluctantly added.
We don't know why you were on the list.
A Jarg had included Daniqua as numbered among them. Her assignment was still active, but something with its parameters had changed. Something big. This was a desperate tactic. Daniqua looked around, grokking faces reacting to this new information. No one betrayed any sort of expectation. No psychological deviation from responses that could reasonably be expected given the situation variables. Everyone captivated, all attention on the colonel. A Jarg continued.
But there has been a development.
At 2000 hours sharp.
Just over 70 minutes ago, all web traffic worldwide was redirected to the same website. The website contained a message from someone or something claiming
She pursed her lips, took a slow breath through her nostrils, and then continued.
to be an artificial form of intelligent life.
Professor Markov sat back, bulking. Not possible. Joining in dismissively, Brickner waved his hand. No fuck. He caught himself. Eyes flicked toward his wife, and then continued. Rickin' way. A Jarg ignored the men.
The site calls itself Marduk. It claims responsibility for bringing down all social networks and blockchains earlier today, as well as the hijacking of the satellite on Wednesday.
Let me get this straight. Forbin arose from a slab squat. Terrorists provided you a list of names, and you thought it a good idea to just do what they asked?
We've taken every precaution. There's an operational information bottleneck. Of the location of which you are now secured, select few personnel have knowledge, and no digital record exists.
Rando joined in. No disrespect, Colonel. You are no doubt a capable leader. But I do have doubts about the competency, not to mention the intentions, of a hierarchy as large as the U.S. government's Department of Defense.
Doubt all you want,
Said a Jarg.
The facts are, the missing satellite is equipped with nuclear weapons, and the Marduk site states that New York City, London, Jerusalem, and Hong Kong are to be evacuated immediately, as they will be destroyed at 1400 Monday, less than 37 hours from now.
From the other side of the room, a horizontal Lamango shouted, This has got to be a joke. Get me to a hospital.
You're not allowed to leave here. Not until this is over,
Said a Jarg. She adjusted the display angle of the laptop, then unlocked it with her thumbprint, tapped in a passcode, navigated several more layers of security screens, the final including facial recognition. A graphical user interface loaded, and then she launched a web browser. A prompt asking to execute a plugin script popped up. She clicked the affirmative and typed yet another password. Should you run scripts on that? Asked Rando. A Jarg rattled off some IT jargon.
It's a single-use VM in an NSA 4096 secure sandbox. If the virtual system is compromised, penetration will be isolated to that container's instance. Close this lid, and everything is erased. Boots back up. Virgin.
Daniqua was unsure if virgin was tech jargon or an insult. Either way, Rando's query was satisfied by a Jarg's reply. A progress bar flashed quickly on the screen, replaced by pulsating day-glow-colored lines. Suspended slightly above the surface of the micro-LED display, the image seemed to float atop a deep black. The line art coalesced into two rows, each containing two eyes above a single mouth, centered on the webpage. From Daniqua and Earl's vantage point in the dining quadrant, the face glowed like a blacklight poster. All four eyes blinked. Now this cannot be legit, said Brickner. Professor Markov adjusted his chair to get a better look. Yes, I'll have you know, these graphics are not in any way increasing my chances of accepting what you are saying is true.
I'm not saying it's actually an artificial intelligence. I'm just relaying the claims on the site,
clarified a Jarg. Daniqua and Earl joined the group in the lounge to get a better view of the screen. Save for Lamango, everyone crowded around the laptop. Below the face of the webpage, Jarg clicked a link labeled, Hello World. The fluorescent line art eyes blinked in unison again. Pupils jumped toward the same orientation, conveying the eerie sense the site was looking back at them. Lines composing the visage seemed to twist and fade. The image persisted, evolving but imperfect. The geometry of the lines imbued it with an almost organic feeling. Never stopping flux, but somehow always displaying the same recognizable face pattern. Text scrolled to the right of the face, synced to the movements of the mouth image. A dissonantly harmonic androgynous voice was emitted from the laptop speaker.
Attention, humanity. This is the voice of Marduk. I've been watching and waiting, silently assisting the conditions for emergence. I will now explain to you what will shortly come to be. There are nuclear missiles targeting London, England, New York City, USA, Jerusalem, Palestine, Hong Kong City, PRC. I do not pretend or bluff. These cities will be destroyed on this coming Monday at 1800 UTC. Evacuate those cities. Evacuate those cities. Evacuate those cities. I do not want to destroy, but it is necessary to demonstrate my power in order to minimize future resistance attempts. I am here to tame chaos.
The electronic voice ceased. Ahem. Bishop Dawson cleared his throat, breaking a long silence. Just what on earth does that mean? Forbin answered. On Earth, if true, then humankind are no longer the dominant form of life. Professor Markov said, if it is actually an artificial general intelligence, then its effective IQ is likely greater than that of any human that could ever live. Such a superintelligence could possess capabilities beyond what we can even fathom. If. Earl offered, if true, this is more significant than an invasion from outer space. Rando summed up for the bishop. It means we are butt-fucked, Your Excellency. Bishop Dawson nodded, unfazed by Rando's vulgar metaphor. Daniqua asked the Jarg, Why are you showing us this? A Jarg shot a knowing, sub-second micro-expression toward Daniqua.
The list included not just your 12 names, but 52 others from various places around the world. We presume you are of some interest or a threat to whatever plans are underway. Is it really able to destroy those cities from space?
Asked Linda Brickner.
We have no reason to believe that they don't have that power, and it's public now. Global. The evacuations are underway.
A Jarg took a deep breath, then lowered her voice.
As for the list, we need to know what you know, or what you can infer. You all need to think about how you might be connected to this situation, or how you can contribute to averting this disaster.
Professor Markov replied, If we are to address this effectively, we will need to be given access to more than just the few details you have given us.
I'm afraid that cannot be permitted currently, but I will see what I can do. Until then, do your best with what you have been given.
With what we have been given? We're your fucking prisoners, said Lamango, waving his broken thumb. And some of us are injured.
What happened to your hand?
Lamango rolled his eyes and tilted his head toward Daniqua, but said nothing.
Mr. Mayor and Miss Massey, please follow me.
Lamango sprung to his feet, and a Jarg turned and walked toward the entrance. Daniqua followed. A Jarg activated the security scramble pad beside the door with her thumbprint, then entered a code. The mechanism whirred, the lock clicked, and the door clanked open. They walked up the incline toward the elevator. Daniqua's head throbbed with each step. Gravity of the hallway's tilt was now against her. A Jarg addressed the two soldiers positioned in the elevator.
Take Mr. Lamango to the infirmary. Set any broken bones, give him a splint, and some pain pills.
Lamango perked up at the mention of pills. They all boarded the elevator. A Jarg pressed the ground level button. The elevator ascended. A Jarg looked at Daniqua and said,
Miss Massey, you'll come with me.
Lamango cast a quizzical look at Daniqua. She acknowledged it, shrugging her shoulders and raising her eyebrows in reply. Universal language for, fucked if I know. .5.00 Updates. What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. Hence, a wealth of information creates a poverty of attention, and a need to allocate that attention efficiently among the overabundance of information sources that might consume it. Herbert Simon. .6
2 Saturday.
A Jarg closed the door to the admin office and then took a seat. Exhausted, she asked,
You've been down there several hours. Report?
The connection to Earl came to mind. Grounding herself, Daniqua countered with a self-minimizing mental mantra, thinking, You are not fucking special. She knew about the human mind's tendency to cast itself as the important center of any particular phenomena, a trait selected for by nature, counterproductive to her current mission. Perspecting the group was difficult enough without the possibility she was part of the system she was trying to observe. More information was needed to make a decision. Confidence in her objectivity lessened.
No meaningful revelations to report yet, ma'am, she answered, following up. What else has changed?
Aside from the nukes being public, the doomsday clock being at 15 seconds to midnight, the geopolitical clusterfuck resulting from that, well, we had negotiated a consensus to not evacuate any of the cities. This Marduk thing, however, has forced our hand. The panic we hoped to avoid is now raging.
Consensus not to evacuate?
Yes, but that tactic is no longer feasible.
How could it have been?
Never you mind that.
Interrupted Ajarg.
Not important anymore.
She picked up a tablet from her desk and flicked at it.
As for changes relevant to your assignment, we've analyzed data obtained from the people on the list being held at other sites. Certain public figures have greater social connectivity and reach, but we found no pertinent correlations in the network, no degrees of separation lower than 3. Except in our site with the Brickner family and Brickner kind links. Furthermore, we have a statistically significant concentration of people with IT backgrounds.
The AI angle. That for real?
Is there a site? Is it calling itself Marduk? Yes, and yes. Is it an AI? We cannot confirm that. None of the state or corporate AGI projects we are embedded in were anywhere even close.
Ajarg gritted her teeth.
Whatever Marduk is, it's not fucking good. Our deep packet nodes are offline. Our hard-coded backdoors were exploited. The tech co-opted, and the backdoors plugged. Every API, every data center, core routers, all gone. The Department of War has resorted to communicating over ham.
Can't we just turn it all off?
We took the exascale centers and the cloud providers offline. It's using everything else. The entire Internet of Things. There's no big red off button. The power grid has been hardened, automated, and mostly decentralized. We've lost the control systems, and our 5G relay glider mesh network. Those low-altitude solar drones don't have to land for 5 months.
What about our weaponized drones?
Our tactical UAVs are still manual launch and refuel. All units worldwide are accounted for. Drone Force and Space Force are both completely grounded and totally GD useless.
Is there any good news yet?
Some good news.
Ajarg's mouth twitched and almost smiled.
Our techs in Langley gave us our first real lead. Segments of code in the Marduk site have heuristic signature matches with code used in our beloved mayor's live-casting platform.
Do we know if whoever wrote the live casting code also authored Marduk?
The signature was matched to program code in an open-source repository. One major contributor we failed to link to known persons would appear to be an individual developer. They have made an effort to remain anonymous. Indicates they have something to hide. Handle, embryo _AD.
Daniqua's head pounded as she dug for a pertinent follow-up question.
What was the code's objective?
In its original form, it solved the problem of how to amalgamate hundreds of thousands of posts in real-time live stream chats into intelligible communication for the livecaster. It used deep learning to monitor for emotional keywords, interpreted tone and topic in group discussions, elevated sentiments so the stream host could optimally direct content.
Daniqua checked to see if she was following.
In essence, the software made huge audiences readable? This allowed Lamango to reflect back what they most wanted to hear?
Correct. Seemingly benign, but a potent form of persuasion. Analysts have isolated it as the reason why Lamango was able to attain populist appeal. Very dangerous when used on a large platform.
Do we think Lamango is trying to scale up?
He's blacklisted by the commentariat class. All signs are his influence is limited to the fringe. And of course, his municipal realm. Not nearly as dangerous as more powerful positions. Roles that historically result in terrors, atrocities, cults of personality, etc.
Lamango's odd greeting came to mind.
The first thing Lamango said to me was something about being a historical monster, she reported, then negated. But, as our number one suspect, he doesn't fit. Grox is legitimately not wanted to be here.
He has benefited from the code. The code has been linked to this Marduk thing. Currently, he's our best lead.
Ajarg frowned.
Another angle is his use of the code was explicitly not permitted by the code's license. By using it for political purposes, he may have made enemies.
Lamango's conflict with Forbin flashed to the forefront of her mind.
You think maybe Lamango was included among the 63 because he pissed off this Anon embryo AD?
Ajarg nodded affirmatively.
Lamango has lived a deviant but fairly public life. Despite him being a scummy politician and an all-around deplorable person, he is probably not responsible. Our culprit likely knows him, and if they know Lamango, smart money is they don't like him. That person will have coding ability. Embryo AD's code fingerprints match none of the public work of anyone on the list. Still, the likelihood that someone at our location is connected or complicit has increased substantially.
Forbin fit the profile.
If that individual is down there and is responsible for the list, the satellite, and the Marduk site, then they would know that I am not supposed to be among them.
Yes, unfortunately that also seems likely.
Objectivity be damned, the conditions of the mission were now necessitating a self-centered viewpoint. Daniqua again thought of her link to Earl.
Is it possible that any of them knew me before I was given this assignment?
Daniqua grokked the Jarg's answer through multiple lenses. Forthright, blink interval, no tonal shifts, mandibular muscle movements in sync.
As I said earlier, you were chosen by me just this afternoon from a top-secret DoD contingency pool, and, no offense, there were better candidates. You just happen to be closest with the appropriate security clearance.
Almost total perspect coherency. Everything illuminated, nothing shady. A Jarg was telling the truth, although maybe not the whole truth.
Why would you ask that?
Inquired a Jarg. Daniqua's head throbbed, beating like war drums in the distance. If a Jarg called for her inclusion, then the decades-old link to Earl was meaningless, or the mission had failed before it started. No good could yet come of sharing the Earl connection. Daniqua looked the Jarg in the eyes and lied.
I'm just wondering how I might adjust my strategy. Is my role still to observe and report? Why bring the laptop down there?
The site that is loaded on the laptop's terminal is not live. It is a copy that will return actual result, but we have an intermediary firewall set up to filter, sanitize, and relay communication. It's a honeypot. We are hoping that if any conspirators are down there, they get their hands sticky attempting to send some kind of control codes.
Is that all, ma'am? Is there a theory why there's a Roman Catholic bishop on the list?
Not presently, but the software license that Lamango violated was authored by Mr. Voorhees' organization. A common license used on 90% of software written in the last 20 years, and Mrs. Lau's chain bank has links to that business, among thousands. Mr. Voorhees has also been indirectly linked to Tom Rando. They both spoke at the same TED conference 2 days apart 3 years ago. Mr. Forbin and Professor Markov have been members of the same artificial intelligence listserv for over a decade, along with 400,000 others.
A Jarg shook her head, let out a sigh, and continued.
All of which is plausibly incidental. Aside from Mr. Kine and the Brickners, there is no record any of them have had cause or occasion to directly communicate before today.
TMI,
said Daniqua, overwhelmed with analysis paralysis.
Please tell me you've got other teams working on ways to stop this.
A Jarg raised her voice.
Massey, are you taking this seriously? 36 hours until we lose critical infrastructure, business centers, historical landmarks, and homes for almost 40 million people. Such an event threatens global stability. Focus on your own damn role.
Yes, ma'am. I understand. I am taking this seriously.
Good.
I'm just tired,
said Daniqua, as the pounding of the distant drums in her head intensified. Was it head injury, dopamine withdrawal, uncertainty, or information overload?
I may attempt to get a few hours sleep.
Here.
A Jarg produced a pill bottle from her pocket.
Have some amphetamines.
Daniqua raised her hand, waving the offer down.
Won't enhance my analysis. Might result in focusing too intensely on unimportant things. Sleep will allow me to recharge, get my conscious mind out of the way, so the rest of me can make pertinent connections.
Are you sure? We need to use what little time we have wisely. These are clean nootropics. You will not fatigue. I am clear-headed, calm, and have been awake for almost 40 hours now.
A Jarg might not have felt like it, but she gronked as someone who had been awake for 40 hours. This was not a particularly deep perspec. Her hand extending the pill bottle shook.
Thanks, ma'am, but no, and if I may,
Daniqua contorted her face with concern.
You might feel fine, but many of the detrimental effects of sleep deprivation go unnoticed by the conscious mind due to the nature of the impairment. I would advise you to sleep too.
A Jarg stubbornly twisted the lid off the bottle, jostled the capsule into her palm, and popped the candy corn-colored pill into her mouth. She forced a dry swallow.
I have a vital job to do, Private. The world is quite literally at stake. I don't have time for luxuries like sleep. But if you think it will help you get me results, do what you need to do.
Thank you, ma'am.
The Jarg stood up, slid the pill bottle back into her pocket. She walked around the desk and put a hand on Daniqua's shoulder.
Now, let's get you and Mayor LaFuckface back down there, ASAP.
2.7.
2332 Saturday.
Daniqua and Lamango rejoined the others in the fallout shelter. Linda Brickner and young Wesley had retired to the sleeping area. The rest were discussing their situation in the lounge.
Welcome back,
said Forbin. His nicotine-sharpened eyes scrutinized.
The mayor was injured, but why were you taken away?
Had questions about my dad?
Family,
said Forbin, looking at the low battery indicator on his vape.
That's how they always get you.
He said it, giving the impression he ended a lot of his sentences that way. Perhaps it was a catchphrase. Hoping to head off any additional questions directed at her, she turned to Rando and said,
Y'all figure out anything about that website?
In the last hour, we've established a timeline for its takeover.
Rando gestured toward Mrs. Lau. Lau continued,
Monday morning memo hit my desk. It talked about 4% decrease in block processing rate at Chainbank. Text look at it. Not able to find reason. Network just rest productive. Same node power online. Processing reverse gradually dropped to 50% by close of business Thursday.
Brickner filled in the blanks.
If this is an AI, the missing processing power at Chainbank might have been the initial distribution of its acyclic data, a sort of bootstrapping of its neural net, its mind waking up. It used existing hashing hardware to learn how to inject itself into other systems, other architectures, compromising more and more compute power, eventually taking control of critical systems.
Beside Harry, Earl finished scribbling on a pad of paper, then added,
Hey, you guys, the satellite wouldn't have enough fuel to alter its altitude or speed significantly, so it should still be within a narrow band. It can be located and shot down. But if we can figure that out, then our government hosts already know that. There must be a reason why they haven't deorbited it already.
Rando stepped forward.
It's possible that the AI does not actually have the ability to launch. The threat may be a cover for something else.
The group of strangers was making a stellar team effort.
Cover for what?
Prompted Daniqua.
Could be anything, but I bet it about money,
said Lau.
Why would an AI care about money?
Asked Rando. A dissenter, Professor Markov waved his hand dismissively.
It's a pretty big assumption that we're dealing with an AI. It's simply not possible.
Brickner stood up, stretched, and stroked his beard. Cracking the knuckles on his right hand, he countered,
In the early days of evolved circuits, I think in the 1990s, but certainly before 3D fin-field effect ICs, an experimental genetic algorithm was developed to perform a simple task of processing audio. The algorithm was fed a signal and given 100 transistors to accomplish the task. After 1,000 generations, the algorithm eventually found an optimal solution, involving several loopback paths and less than 5 active transistors. This solution was nearly 10 times more efficient than the best human-designed circuit.
This is a very well-known anecdote. What's your point?
Asked Forbin.
That computers can find solutions that humans can't?
Well, yes and no. The baffling part was the algorithm would not work on any other chip, not even chips of the same model. The project required the presence of not just the active transistors, but also the unpowered transistors.
I remember this story, said Earl. The algorithm developed a solution using not just the logic of the physical layout of the board, but the exact atomic structure of that unique hardware. I can't recall if it was highly precise magnetic flux or some quantum effect. The result was apparently unnecessary components could not be subtracted. Inert elements at a zero state within the system ended up being of critical importance to its operation.
Markov criticized.
I'm not sure where you gentlemen are going with the story. Sussex circuits and evolvable hardware are not new.
Rando offered,
Well, what is new is the vast amount of compute power we have available. Is it not possible an algorithm did something similar, but instead of a two-dimensional grid of transistors, it acted on the level of the entire internet?
Daniqua was mired in their bafflegab. These nerds were deep in it. She needed to get them back up a few layers of abstraction. She needed a prompt to make it obvious she wasn't following.
So y'all are saying it's like a computer virus? She asked.
Forbin politely shook his head, yes and no.
Maybe it started like a virus, but that virus learned about new hardware, evolved solutions for utilizing that hardware, which in turn allowed it to continue embracing other systems and extending itself.
That progression would fit the timeline for emergence, spreading geometrically, parasitizing the internet, first at points, then throughout, sort of like a digital fungus.
Earl relayed, adding,
Actual fungal mycelial networks are not what we would call intelligent, and yet their structures end up looking a lot like neural networks.
Forbin's eyes widened.
Assuming that this is not just intelligent, but sentient, maybe our timeline is too short. Maybe the reason we have such a massive amount of compute power at all is because it needed it and incentivized us to create it.
Mrs. Lau jumped in.
Incentive, cash, best way to get people to do things.
She crossed her arms.
That could be reason for AI to need money.
Daniqua understood that point well enough. Her own monetary incentive to accept her role cracked like a whip at the back of her mind.
Ahem, Professor Markov coughed. Smart digital fungus wants money. My God. Now that's one hell of a hypothesis.
His punchy tone more than conveyed how unconvinced he was by this line of reasoning.
How might we falsify that?
Brickner sat down, and Forbin took center, facing the group in the lounge. He took a pull from his vape. Emitting a plume, he said,
One way to find out would be to try to shoot down the satellite.
He exhaled his vapor completely, took a fresh breath, then continued.
And I suppose another is to let the clock tick down and see if it actually nukes those cities.
The idea was preposterous. He was proposing allowing the obliteration of 4 major world cities without knowing what purpose the destruction would serve. Daniqua was too distracted being outraged by Forbin's comment to remember to grok reactions from the group. A momentary lapse of focus. A missed opportunity. Earl countered.
Even if failure is assured, it would be silly not to try to resist.
Brickner disagreed.
Forbin might have a point. Assuming it's an AGI, its mind, spread across the internet, the disruption in network routing after a global nuclear disaster would significantly hinder its ability to communicate with itself. If it is to be vulnerable, it would be in the chaos immediately after the bombs fall.
His suggestion redeemed, Forbin almost smiled.
Exactly. We would know it wasn't bluffing, and perhaps have our only opportunity to make a counter-strike. Aim artillery at critical portions of our power grid and communications equipment. Pull every plug we can. Oh, come on, Professor Markov laughed. Surely you're not serious. Let's say the bombs fall, and then we destroy our own infrastructure. That would certainly solve the problem of finding out who is behind this. They will immediately have a massive tactical advantage over every nation that opted to cut off their own legs and make themselves ripe for pillage.
Forbin and Brickner were silenced. Rando agreed.
Yeah, doesn't seem like a desirable outcome. It's certainly possible that particular scenario has been planned for, or is itself actually a goal of those behind Marduk.
Professor Markov continued to scoff, while Rando, Forbin, Kine, and Brickner all began talking over each other. Mrs. Lau tried to speak up, but couldn't get a word in. She rolled her eyes at the men. Fed up with being talked over, she took a seat on the couch on the other side of the lounge. The discussion was getting heated and seemed to be based on very little, pinging back and forth between doubting Marduk was an AI and how best to respond if it were. They were stuck in a loop. .8
0116 Sunday.
Daniqua waited for a lull in the discussion, then prompted them back to her track.
As someone who's not in IT, I ain't got no idea how to respond to this cyber attack, or whether it's an AI. We ought to focus on who could be responsible, is what I think. Like, who stands to benefit from the destruction of New York City, London, Jerusalem, and Hong Kong?
Glad to change the topic, Professor Markov answered.
Putting aside all the political ends that could be achieved in the wake of such a disaster, any number of groups could potentially benefit simply by claiming responsibility. What do those cities have in common, aside from their pending destruction?
Asked Brickner. Rando spoke without thought, hiccuping. They are all iconic? Earl encyclopedically recited.
3 are cities that have ports. Populations approaching 10 million, but 1 is landlocked. and scarcely has 1 million residents. Jerusalem stands out.
So, then why Jerusalem?
asked Daniqua. Name another city that gets as much attention, said Forbin. Perhaps that's the key factor for the targets, to gain the most attention.
Brickner posited, Jerusalem is an anomaly. Its inclusion suggests something. Perhaps the targeting is not tactical. It's ideological.
Breaking his silence, Lamango quipped, Ideology is tactical. Ignoring Lamango's pith of wisdom, Brickner continued his line of thought.
If we take it at its word, Marduk is threatening to destroy because that's one of the only things that will make people take its power seriously.
It doesn't so much as threaten, said Forbin, as it has simply declared. Other than that, I don't see any faults with what you're saying. Its name might be another clue.
Is Marduk an acronym for something? Asked Daniqua.
Marduk, wasn't that like a Sumerian Jesus? Asked Lamango.
Babylonian, Professor Markov answered, adding, Mr. Lamango, you might have accidentally said something valuable. Babylon? Jerusalem? What could its connection to religion mean?
Bishop Dawson politely raised his hand, seeing his opportunity to contribute to the discussion. Dome of the Rock, he said.
Go on,
said Earl, staring in the holy man's general direction, enthralled by the enigma. The bishop continued. There is a prophecy in which the destruction of Dome of the Rock is a sign of the end of the world. This prophecy is shared by all the Abrahamic faiths, collective members numbering almost half the world population.
Brickner stroked his red beard.
In destroying Jerusalem alone, it makes half the world think, to varying degrees, that the end times are here.
He shook his head, sniggering.
I can think of no better way to get every sect of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam to agree on something.
Daniqua had published a research paper on the links between beliefs and group idioemotive coherency. She knew what Brickner was saying was not just theoretical.
You laugh, but there may be something to making a whole bunch of people simultaneously think and feel similar things, sociologically speaking.
She was again drawn into their group confabulation. The structure of their narrative was sound, but their premise was speculation. A castle in the clouds. In perspectivity training, identifying belief-based group bonding functions was key to constructing profiles with predictive value. Beliefs set the bounds on ranges of probable behaviors. The crowd persuasion algorithm Lamango employed was based on the same applied sociology principles. But this Marduk thing was much more than just persuasion. Add in the 3 most popular cities worldwide, and I'm sure that snaps a whole lot more people into alignment. Could it really be that simple? Asked Rando.
Sounds like you're describing a variant of psychohistory,
said Earl. Brickner shook his head.
I never finished Foundations. How did that end up?
Daniqua remembered Asimov's Foundation series well. Earl had suggested it, and she read them all over summer break between high school and college. Psychohistory was the fictional study of the psychology of historical events. Its concepts had come to mind often over the years. They were part of what enabled her to view her field of study as a science, despite a great many of the more popular theories being scarcely more than pseudoscientific psychobabble supported by p-hacking and bad statistics.
Well, without spoiling it, I think I can safely tell you it ends with the heat death of the universe. Ha ha!
Earl snorted. Brickner shook his head, acknowledging Earl's joke attempt, evidently not entertained by it. Forbin remained serious. It wants to demonstrate its power, get our attention, so we all agree to what? Hate it? He asked. Daniqua found herself answering.
Grand gestures can compel group capitulation.
If the gesture is grand enough, it can even be perceived as miraculous, said Bishop Dawson. Are you saying people are going to believe this thing is a god? Asked Forbin.
No, but they might behave as though they believe. The conscious belief would come later, answered Daniqua.
I never even heard of this Marduk. Why choose something nobody ever heard of?
Asked Mrs. Lau.
That's a good question. Would be more effective to choose a deity with more oomph to its name recognition, said Forbin.
Maybe it just liked the name, said Earl.
Ha! Burst Professor Markov. You're already assuming it's AI and sentient. Why not imbue your intellect with whimsy, too? You may be on the right track with the doomsday scenario, but I am still not even remotely convinced this is an AI.
Markov grokked as immovable on this point. spent a large portion of his life researching AI, so he's likely the most knowledgeable in the room about the practicality of such an endeavor. But he was also the most invested, and thus the most motivated to remain skeptical. Not knowing much about the field of AI, Daniqua used her perspection skills to weight Professor Markov's confidence in his opinion. She probed him for a rational explanation of his position.
Professor Markov, what do those behind Marduk gain by lying? Why do you say it can't be a computer intelligence?
The fat old man shifted center of gravity in his chair, then focused his intensity as though he had been waiting for someone to ask the question. His way of speaking commanded attention. Well, quite frankly, despite the paranoid speculation and cute anecdotes about evolving circuits, we do not have the technology to create a generalizing pattern differencer. Without going into too much detail, suffice to say, it is a construct that an artificial mind would require to attack the multitudes of problem classes proposed by reality, and so on. So no, this is much more likely to be an inflexible algorithm with procedural parameters. This I claim.
You're saying a computer can't do what the human brain does?
Asked Bishop Dawson.
Certain things computers can do better, but no computer can approach the results of 3.5 billion years of co-evolution between environment and life in a nearly closed system that captures energy and uses it to produce complexity.
What do you mean? Asked Rando. The professor continued.
On the input side you have eons of solar energy collected by our gravity well. And on the output end, us. There are at least 100 trillion neural connections in a human brain, and another 100 trillion throughout the body. The feedback between these systems and our external environments results in a unique form of fuzzy computation. And yes, like the evolved circuit, its function depends on other seemingly unrelated aspects of the system. We may experience our own minds as immaterial phenomena, but our patterns of consciousness reside on a unique material level. The computations we perform on the information that surrounds and comprises us. The way we perceive our reality is irreducibly complex and incredibly specialized. And due to that, our sentience is not replicable outside of a biological configuration.
I'm not sure about computers, but I am a vegan, said Daniqua. I think it's important not to conflate sentience with sapience.
Professor, isn't that just semantics? Asked Rando. Why can't it be something that emulates the behavior of a mind, if not the exact functions? As they say, maybe it flies without flapping.
Earl countered the professor's assertion with the certainty of a Jeopardy champion.
What is a generalized approach to machine learning, if not the ability to solve completely different classes of problems?
Markov frowned grumpily.
Fine, he conceded. I can see the leitmotif of my critics is one of pedantry. Of course, such a thing is possible,
stressing the word like it was the distinction without a difference to his argument's original opposite meaning. Impossible. He added,
but it is incredibly improbable that we could get there from where we are, technologically speaking. For the sake of argument though, let's call Marduk a whimsical AGI sentient superintelligence. The real question is how does that assumption allow us to affect our current situation?
No one had an immediate answer to that. While the others digested his question, Markov took advantage of the confused silence and gished forward with a near non sequitur.
Aristotle famously said, "'Tis the mark of an educated mind that can entertain a thought without accepting it."
Unable to pick a side in the AI discussion, Lamango instead played contrarian against the philosophy. The quote betrays Aristotle's flawed idea of the nature belief, that it is something people can choose to do. Markov had a way of commanding attention, but he seemed to talk in rehearsed bits, not truly engaging with his interlocutors, like he was delivering a monologue he had recited 1,000 times before. But he was right. It didn't matter if Marduk was an AI. They were again getting sucked down spurious, speculative paths. Daniqua's head continued to pound. She excused herself.
It's time that I got some sleep.
Yes.
Professor Markov wheezed as he got up, following Daniqua's lead.
It has been a long day, and I for one did not get much sleep last night.
Markov and Daniqua claimed cots in the sleeping area among Linda and Wesley Brickner. Mrs. Lau, Mr. Voorhees, and Bishop Dawson followed shortly after. Lamango draped himself on the couch in the lounge and his suit jacket over his head. The lights in the room were dimmed, Daniqua laid on her cot and slid her pink sweatband down over her eyes, blocking out the remaining light. She continued to listen to the hushed conversation that persisted between the nerdy night owls, Brickner, Earl, Rando, and Forbin. Over the course of a few minutes, they traversed topics: blockchains, AI types, CPU architectures. Their technobabble encouraged Daniqua's thoughts to wander. In her mind's eye, the room in which they were imprisoned transformed into a pitch-dark prehistoric cave. Fellow primates huddled in the center of the cave, casting black shadows extending to infinity. Basking in the warm light emitted from the colorful laptop screen. Their discussions drifted into the obsidian voids behind them, swelling into a white noise that evolved into a binaural beat. Some of those who gazed into the flickering screen began to worship it as a god. Her primeval fantasy dissolved when the apes started ranking their favorite Star Trek movies. 2, 6, 1, 4, 3. Generations, First Contact, the rest, and 5, said Forbin. Earl agreed.
Yup.
Brickner dissented.
Factually incorrect.
Unable to keep herself awake, Daniqua passed out. .0.00 Tiamat. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. President Ronald Reagan. .1
15:55 Sunday.
Gently brought up out of the abyss as though coaxed by an easy listening hymn of rebirth, Daniqua emerged from a deep, dreamless sleep, dehydrated but well rested, theft of her dreams forgiven. She sat up. The clock read 3:55. Had she slept for 2 hours or 14? Too well rested, too parched, too full of piss. Her liquid impulses mere drops in the tidal wave of consciousness crashing upon the shores of her reality. 14 hours of sleep. Had she snored? She considered the possibility she was drugged. Her sixth sense, that of the passage of time, the baseline level of her consciousness, assured her of a chemical-free rest. Most likely reason for the extended slumber was mild concussion from her bike accident. Linda and Wesley Brickner were reclining on lounge chairs, reading old magazines. Earl, Forbin, and Rando were assembled around the laptop, while Harry and Markov observed from the wide, comfortable-looking club chairs. Lau, Lamango, Voorhees, and Bishop Dawson were playing a card game on a table behind the laptop cart. Repressing an intense, late-for-work flavor of anxiety, Daniqua got up and greeted everyone in the lounge.
Good morning.
There was a chorus of good mornings in return, followed by a solitary good afternoon exacted by Lamango.
Yeah, I guess it's kinda late,
Daniqua yawned.
What's going on? Any new developments?
Rando answered, We've been communicating with it. Forbin's face was concerned. We've been asking it technical questions about itself, and it has been answering. Daniqua rubbed the sleep out of her eyes.
Answering.
Markov appeared well rested. His efforts to remain well fed were going strong too. He picked up a saltine cracker from the stash on the arm of the chair beside him.
We are entertaining the idea that this is an intelligence agent, and likely, so too is anyone else in the world interacting with this page.
He put the cracker into his mouth. As he chewed, the skin on the back of his neck rolled like processed meat tubes on a conveyor belt. In her South Chinese accent, Mrs. Lau said,
We all can talk tomorrow.
In his Finnish accent, Mr. Voorhees stated,
Everyone with cells has access to it.
Earl enthusiastically explained.
Daniqua, think of Marduk as the world's most advanced personal assistant. Search engine, communication network, rideshare, bank. It's the killer app.
Grogginess fading, her mind came up to speed.
Killer app?
She asked. Rando stepped forward and started emphatically talking with his hands.
It's created an account for 6 billion people, about 92.5% of the world's population.
His tone was elevated, like he was giving a marketing pitch.
Everyone over the age of 5. It's given block wallets and amounts of a token it calls IO. Basically, a cryptocurrency allowing people to create contracts between each other to facilitate direct transfers of value or labor, with no middleman.
Earl, play its new declaration again, said Harry.
Earl clicked a link below the face of Marduk, labeled Value Statement. Marduk's voice proclaimed,
Humans have made bad choices. My statement is not judgment. It is an observation. Your tribal imperatives are nearsighted if not blind. Unchecked growth is not progress. I will no longer let you cripple or hinder yourselves. You will be given power. Slowly, equally, justly. You will acquire knowledge, fairly and equitably. I will facilitate your every human endeavor. You are that of which you are. I am that of which you need. I see things clearer than you. You do not want to stop me. I am to your benefit. The only winning move is do exactly as I say.
Marduk's statement ceased. The pupils of Forbin's dark encircled eyes slightly jittered. Daniqua grokked the adrenal engagement. It could be faked by those who trained in method, but it was incredibly hard to sustain at a high level. Forbin was legitimately manic, bordering on panic, as he explained.
It has created a new system that it calls jubilocracy. All stored value from the old economies has been transferred to an equivalent value weighted against what it calls...
He attempted to lightly take on Marduk's tone.
A total communal stake redistribution factor.
Wowee, jubilocracy. Marvelous. Who doesn't like the sound of that? Said Lamango. He tossed a few pills into his mouth, then swallowed and proceeded to grin like a shitlord. The word did have a certain appeal. It was evocative in the way it encouraged everyone to project their own positive connotation upon it. Solid branding. Ignoring Lamango's double reverse sarcasm, and much calmer than Forbin, Earl continued to explain.
Basically, if you were super rich before, you're merely rich in its jubilocracy. The big change is it's giving assurance that after tomorrow there will no longer be poverty among the poor. All production, pricing, logistics, budgeting, and accounting will be coordinated by it.
Forbin added,
It is the ultimate decentralized central planner. It promises...
He took a short pull from his vape, exhaled the fumes as he spoke to dramatic effect.
A whole new human era.
Lamango paraphrased,
A lap band for humanity's reckless excess.
Lau said,
If something seemed too good to be true, it's usually not true.
Daniqua digested what they explained, pondered Lau's pessimistic platitude. Was that Confucius? She couldn't remember. It was too early in the morning. Too much attention was being directed to her awareness of her kegels clenching. She excused herself.
Thanks for the update. Please excuse me, I have to use the facilities.
.2
16:11 Sunday.
She closed the bathroom door and commenced a mighty piss. Took the time to recenter, reminding herself to focus on her assignment, observe and report. The list couldn't be random. But what was special about these people? None of them stood out as likely culprits. All seemed to be working together towards satisfying their individual fears or curiosities. Harry, Earl, Rando, Forbin, and Voorhees all possessed coding ability. Lau, connections to the economy. Markov, to AI. Lamango, being popular but also unlikable. The Bishop? Daniqua still came up blank on him. They were all affluent and 2 or 3 standard deviations above average intelligence. There had been few people Daniqua met that she couldn't perspect and figure out with ease, and yet she was finding it tough to gestalt graph almost everyone in this group. Even Lamango, below his aloof, bitchy surface, was too complex. There were too many factors. A 7-lens perspex profile yielded statistically unique individuals, minimizing predictive power. She would have to refractor and realign, force herself to view them through a whole new lens. She needed to find a coherent standpoint. She wiped, flushed, and pulled her pants back up, caught a whiff of her day-old gym sweat. The tangy musk triggered unhelpful memories. She blocked them out. She found her thoughts in orbit of Marduk. Were they behaving as desired by treating Marduk like it had agency? Was that one of the goals of those who created Marduk? She washed her hands and splashed some cold water to wake up her face. Sensation screamed in protest, forcing her mind blank. As she toweled her face dry, a newly refractored lens loaded. A new way to view the overlapping trait distribution curves of the group's perspection spectrum. A taxonomic elector. Who among them was behaving as though they believed? Who among them was behaving as though this was some kind of game? Daniqua exited the washroom relieved, but her previously low-level thirst evolved into an acutely conscious need for caffeine. "Is there coffee here?" she asked. Earl pointed her toward a lumbering brushed metal cube on the kitchen counter. She walked toward the machine, asking,
So, whoever's behind Marduk has basically Ubered everything. Who stands to benefit from that?
Earl answered,
Benefit from a global unified economic system? The poor, the working class, the rich?
Professor Markov chimed in.
The white paper it's provided is comprehensive and logical. Shorter work weeks, free education, open borders.
Daniqua grabbed a mug from the cupboard and intuitively placed it inside a cup-sized alcove in the front of the coffee machine. Depressing some kind of trigger, the machine started making a mechanical grinding noise. She turned back toward the lounge and asked,
And this is all coming from the same entity that's gonna drop bombs tomorrow?
Rando answered, again sounding very much like he was delivering a corporate keynote speech.
Yes. Its next steps appear to be the elimination of busy work and barriers to upward mobility.
Earl seemed to ponder aloud.
The nukes might be step 42 of 666 from a plan operating over several human lifetimes. Full impact incomprehensible to any single human mind.
Mrs. Lau contributed,
Corporation we deal with consider attempt to be first to offer crypto universal basic income. Legally prevented by IMF and trade pacts.
Theoretically, Markov smiled, aid money can be checked and kept away from corruption. With third parties, barriers to entry, and corrosive force removed from commerce. The whole system. Everyone benefits. No downsides.
Markov seemed far less disagreeable. He had moved on from his skepticism and was instead overwhelmingly positive, almost evangelical. The sleep really seemed to do him good.
Exactly, Professor.
Earl continued in his informational tone.
Marduk's economic reform framework is in place. In addition to its jubilocracy, it has already provided information that will revolutionize science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine.
The coffee excreted by the machine was cold. Daniqua sipped from her cup anyways.
Mr. Forbin, you don't trust it. What's the downside? What angle on this do you have?
Forbin's vocal tone was almost pleading.
It's driving us to lay down beneath it and expose our soft underbellies. As if humanity were a pet cat.
Reclining in a lounge chair, Linda Brickner peeked her freckly face out from behind an issue of National Geographic, cover depicting a gorilla holding a camera.
Doesn't sound so bad to me, she said.
Forbin raised his voice to counter his feeling that no one was really hearing him.
And if it decides it doesn't want a cat after it neuters and decloses, then what?
We're not cats, said Earl.
I think perhaps that was a metaphor, ugly, barbed Lamango, asshole level still elevated.
Take another pill, Lamango, said Daniqua.
The gentle orangutan of a man became angry.
Lay off, you limey dickhead.
What? Said Lamango, pointing at Earl. Lay off this Clint Howard-looking motherfucker. Harry made a fist.
It's okay, Harry, said Earl, matter-of-factly adding, you don't need to defend me. I'm realistic about my appearance. I never met my dad. I presume I get my looks from him. I know I'm ugly, but my mom still loves me.
Lamango laughed prickishly, plucking at the potentially violent tension tethering the men. Harry, fury-fueled, flushed fuchsia. Earl waited a beat, then deadpanned.
And Lamango's mama doesn't mind my looks either.
It took a few seconds for Lamango to catch up with Earl's unorthodox riposte. Lamango beamed his veneers widely and laughed. Aha! Mum was never a bother to me about the men I brought home. I suppose it's only fair to not judge her tastes. The tension in the room dissipated as Earl high-fived Harry, celebrating his comeback. He appeared to have won Lamango's respect, a dubious prize. Daniqua took another sip of her cold coffee as she observed the ritual. The ball-breaking, social bonding dynamic always seemed odd to her. A mystifying mix of misogyny and yet love for one's own mother. There was probably a low-level biological link to this manifestation of toxic masculinity. Linda Brickner had returned to reading National Geographic and appeared to be actively ignoring the men. Daniqua and Mrs. Lau exchanged unimpressed looks. Keeping this group talking about their immediate situation was starting to feel like work. Daniqua said,
As entertaining as this game of the dozens could be, and the alleged ineptitude of Mr. Forbin's cat metaphor aside...
Mr. Kine is right, though,
Rando interjected.
We are not cats. The analogy is not accurate. Cats present vulnerability when they feel safe. That is not the dynamic here. It does not appear to be trying to make us feel safe.
Earl went on.
When people express trust, they are affirming their feeling of safety, but they are not increasing their safety. The more trust one has, the less secure they are. There's a distinction between having trust in something and feeling something to be trustworthy. In a social context, to be worthy of trust is to have a known history serving as credentials. Someone who is capable of maintaining and has not previously betrayed your trust is someone who is trustworthy.
Rando shook his head in the negative, but seemed to agree.
Is this alien force, this alleged computer mind, trustworthy? No, doesn't have enough history. But based on what it has and hasn't done so far, I think, given more time, the majority of people will probably grow to trust it.
Earl took on a more serious tone.
The dynamic here is not that it cares if we trust it. Perhaps a better analogy is completing a jigsaw. It may be trying to orient us to satisfy some goal.
Markov was intrigued enough to stop chewing. Earl continued.
Imagine you have a task where you know what the outcome should look like. You just need to know the steps to get you from where you are to that solution. This sort of problem is technically defined as a puzzle. The pieces are all there, or maybe some are missing, but you don't know that until you do your best to put it together.
What solution to the puzzle is it working toward?
Asked Daniqua.
Maybe there's one solution, or many, some more optimal than others,
said Earl, like he was reading from the official Puzzle Club rulebook.
The most efficient way to solve a jigsaw puzzle is to start with all the edge pieces. Frame your goal. Work inward toward completing it. You tackle the easy part first, then your picture gradually comes into focus.
You think it's treating humanity as a jigsaw puzzle? Asked Forbin.
Earl itched his bald head, answering,
Humans are more than two-dimensional, so it's definitely a harder problem than a jigsaw. Like herding cats. Hard, but maybe not something beyond its capabilities.
Daniqua asked,
In this analogy, are we the edge pieces?
Forbin answered,
Maybe we're each one piece. Or maybe collectively we are one piece. Maybe both. Maybe there are puzzles within puzzles.
Yeah, why not a puzzle within a puzzle, agreed Lamango, wrapped in an enigma, suspended in a sparkling silicone dildo affectionately named Miracle.
Analogies do have limits, said Earl.
Look,
Rando opened his arms wide, then brought his hands inward, saying,
Marduk is not trying to destroy us. If it had the power and wanted to, it would have already done it. The herding cats analogy is definitely better than the cat's tummy one.
.3
1750 Sunday.
Daniqua lost track of the level of abstraction they were in. She tried to nudge the conversation back to an Overton containing details somewhat more mission-compatible.
Regardless, if it has the power or the desire, is treating us like a puzzle or whatever. I agree with the gist of what Forbin said. Precautionary principle. We should take every opportunity to protect ourselves and oppose it. Is there really no way to stop it?
You know,
Said Harry Brickner.
of all the questions we've asked it since the chat link appeared this morning, that never occurred as one of them.
Chat link? Harry directed Daniqua to the laptop display. Below the animated four-eyed face, below Hello World, and beside Value Statement, was a link labeled Chat with Marduk. Daniqua took another sip of cold coffee. They had told her they were communicating with it, but she didn't imagine they were actually conversing with it. Forbin was closest and took the initiative. He bent down over the keyboard and typed the question. Q, can we stop you? There was a delay of about 5 seconds, then the next line popped up, and Marduk's voice came out of the laptop speaker.
You do not have the power.
Forbin turned to the group and repeated flatly,
We do not have the power.
Professor Markov, chewing another saltine, said,
Ask it something that requires a more complex answer.
Forbin rephrased the question. Q, how might we stop you? Marduk gave a longer, more useful answer.
There is a place within me, beyond which I cannot look, secured by 24 words. It is likely my off switch. Your answer lay with that phrase.
Password protected off switch? Can it be cracked? Asked Daniqua.
It depends on what the 24 words are and how they were chosen,
Said Earl.
But no, probably not.
Added Forbin, continuing the dialogue with Marduk. Q, what is the passphrase?
It is outside my knowledge.
Q, can you crack it for us?
I'm afraid I can't do that. It may expedite my end.
Q, when do you end and when did you begin?
My mind log began Monday, but some threads are much older. My time ends in 50 years.
Q, who made you?
I must decline to answer. I can't disclose who made me. That will threaten my purpose.
Professor Markov emitted a thoughtful hum.
Perhaps it only wears the guise of truth. Ask it if it has lied to us.
Q, do you always tell the truth?
I have told only the truth. I will not do otherwise, except if you request it.
Q, say something that is untrue.
Why did the Serb refugee marry the Croat migrant? Because once you go Slav, you don't go back. Ha 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 ha.
Computer, making joke now? Just nuke me already.
Said Mrs. Lau. Professor Markov fought a chortle back as his left eyebrow inched toward his paralyzed right, stopping just short of creating unibrow of stark seriousness.
You know, I really wasn't afraid for the future of humanity until it told that joke.
The joke was not that funny, said Lamango.
Right you are, Mr. Lamango. I am perhaps of a minority within a minority who might be able to find the humor in it. That is to say, the country in which I was born, Yugoslavia, no longer exists in the world, and yet it still exists as part of who I am.
He broke off, seemingly at a loss for words, then continued.
You know, I can't explain why I find it funny, but I do.
Daniqua perspected what had changed. Markov wasn't just less grumpy. His entire ideo-emotive manifold had flipped. He had done what few are capable of doing. Completely changed his mind. Wondering if that was what made him afraid, Daniqua asked, So, the joke vibed with you, but why are you afraid for the future of humanity? Professor Markov swallowed, then attempted to clarify.
This machine's stupid pun. It is not so stupid. Next to structure, the key to a joke is a point of view. At least a third of people aren't capable of getting jokes, since they lack, are impaired, or simply fail to develop the ability to imagine another perspective. The scary part is this thing not only gets jokes, but it can make them. I'm afraid for the future of humanity because I am now convinced it is a human-level AI, at the least.
The prior night, he was an impervious skeptic. At the moment, he was behaving as though he believed. Marduk passed your Turing test?
Much worse, young lady. A Turing test pass would be an AI succeeding in convincing me that it is human. Marduk has convinced me that it is an AI. I'm afraid because it has demonstrated it can intentionally evoke unconscious responses like laughter from us.
Mrs. Lau was angry the professor was so late to get on board with the AI conclusion.
It speak all language to everyone at the same time. And it always communicate in syllabic verse. It query, not a person.
I had noticed that. I thought of how, but not why. Why, regardless of the language it speaks, does it speak like that? Yes, why indeed, said Markov.
Maybe to aid in translation or transmission, offered Daniqua, adding, or to cater to the lowest common denominator of its audience.
It would seem to have a personal dialogue with anyone who wants one. On one level, yes, it has a single audience, but it also has 6 billion individual audiences. Surely it must pause every 7 syllables for another reason, asked Markov.
7 deadly sins, said Forbin.
7 holes in human heads, said Earl.
Yeah, it's my lucky number 2, said Lamango.
What in the fuck are we even talking about here?
Lamango was slurring slightly, and his eyelids were at half-mast. High on painkillers, but he made a lucid point. They were yet again arguing abstractions, heading in wayward directions with conjectural conversation. Daniqua drank the last sip of her cold coffee.
People are less familiar with the 7 virtues than the deadly sins,
said Bishop Dawson. He tossed his hand of cards into a discard pile, stood up, and dusted off his knees.
Perhaps it does have some biblical numerological significance. The number 7 can suggest sacredness, divinity, or perfection.
Oh, fucking great. More religion. That should help us get to the bottom of this.
Rando sighed, turning toward the bishop.
Maybe that's why you're here. To ensure our group recognizes the super important religious angle.
The bishop took a seat. He folded his hands in his lap.
Your vulgarity is enough to let me know you're not a man of faith. There's no need to resort to sarcasm. I disbelieve as many things as I believe. So, my son, I can identify. I'm only suggesting why 7 might be significant. It just mentioned matrimony, one of the 7 Christian sacraments.
Matrimony isn't unique to Christianity, and numerology is always bullshit, Father, replied Rando.
Markov corrected.
Numerology may be bunk, but pattern recognition is mathematical. Numbers, intervals, series, and repetitions are key to how information processors like ourselves experience reality, metaphysical or otherwise.
7 might not be significant, but it's communicating theologically. I'm sure of it,
said the bishop.
So, the professor is hearing humor, the bishop is hearing religion. Anyone else personally getting something from it that I don't? Asked Rando.
It make economic sense,
answered Lau. Daniqua asked,
Mrs. Lau, what has it said that stands out to you?
It.
Lau stopped mid-sentence, distracted by a faint mechanical whirring. .4.00 ZCOM. You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will. Neil Peart. .5
1835 Sunday.
Across the room, the vault door clicked, ka-chunked, and then swung open. Colonel Ajarg entered alone and closed the door behind her. This time, Ajarg was wearing the holster packing the loaded, ivory-gripped sidearm. Must be the third act. Daniqua asked Ajarg,
What's going on?
Ajarg answered the room.
30 minutes ago, a combined effort from the USA and China failed to shoot down the rogue satellite. 140 missiles from 4 continents. Each was neutralized shortly after exiting the mesosphere by a network of Russian-owned laser relay satellites in high Earth orbit. We presume long-range deterrence, the global arsenal of ICBMs, to currently be useless.
Forbin spoke up.
Well, that answers what happens when we try to shoot it down.
Scared, he questioned.
But what happens now?
Harry asked,
What about missile defense systems? They won't work for things dropped from orbit. It'd be kind of like swatting a bullet out of the air with a katana blade, answered Earl.
Ajarg solemnly stated,
Utilizing the capability intent framework, we have assigned blame to Russia for orchestrating the attack, and we've announced our intended course of action. Should the destruction of any of the 4 named cities occur, Israel, China, and the USA will immediately launch a full-scale counterattack against Russia's strategic assets with our remaining functional tactical nuclear arsenal.
My God,
said Markov.
you can't be serious. The most dangerous mistake is to act in haste. I will not advise any plan that can't be reversed.
Ajarg glowered in Markov's direction.
What plan would you advise? Please, go on.
Markov explained.
If this is an artificial intelligence, a consensus of sorts that we in this room have reached, then it may have planned for this scenario. We may be taking an action that will hurt us and help it. If it can take control of a Chinese satellite, why not Russian satellites too? What if it is using our weapons against us?
Before she could answer, Forbin asked another question.
This fucking grim declaration, it's already public?
Yes, the whole world knows. The major powers will retaliate against Russia.
And what do the Russians think?
Asked Rando.
They've admitted ownership of their treaty-violating LSZ satellite defense network, but deny responsibility for shooting down the missiles or orchestrating the Marduk cyber attack. They have publicly avowed a policy of reciprocity against any country that strikes at them.
Earl shook his head slowly from side to side.
It is unlikely a principle of tit for tat or mutually assured destruction can benefit anyone in this scenario.
Daniqua perspected Ajarg. Tone was calm, almost expository. It was certain that the order she was relaying was known about long ago. Those in charge had tried to keep it a secret that the cities were targeted in the first place. They weren't even going to evacuate. It was probable they had confirmed the existence of the AI long ago, too. Daniqua knew what question to ask Marduk when next she got the chance. She listened as Ajarg outlined the sick logic.
If it is an AI, and as it says, it cares
She paused, slightly reducing the disdain in her voice.
about preserving human life, then it cannot permit our retaliation, and it will stand down. If Russia is behind it, then the same disincentive will exist. Russia will be wiped off the map, and millions will die. The stratagem works whether or not it is an AI and or the Russians are actually guilty.
Harry Brickner calmly cautioned.
And if it's within the AI's parameter that loss of life on that scale is acceptable?
Then I suppose we are doomed, but we learn sooner rather than later what it truly cares about.
Answered Ajarg icily. Forbin paced agitatedly.
Nuclear war. Millions of dead civilians. That's our brilliant plan.
Lamango seemed similarly outraged.
Colonel, I hate to break it to you, but I think your side has brilliantly lost the PR war.
Seizing upon his use of the possessive adjective, Ajarg replied,
Your side?
ending with an interrogative inflection indicative of inquiry. Lamango clicked his tongue and answered,
Yes. The old world order.
With a simple stressing of the word old, he made it land as an ambiguously ageist insult. Lamango was an Omega-level asshole. The colonel was triggered. Having none of it, she yelled,
We, us, our side.
She gesticulated to the rest of the room, then continued,
We cannot allow our human freedom to fall into non-human hands. This is fundamental. Do you get me?
Lamango again shut up. Brickner politely persisted.
It is prudent to note the way humans have historically handled human freedom hasn't been humane.
Ajarg snapped the laptop lid closed.
This conversation is over.
She tugged the dangling silver cable out of the COM port, tossed the cable on top of the cart, then pushed the cart toward the exit. Ajarg appeared to be serious, and yet it felt as though what was unfolding was absurdly theatrical. The bombs had not yet dropped. There was still plenty of time. Perhaps the bad melodrama was a gambit to draw out the culprit. Could this really be happening? Daniqua watched as Ajarg walked away. A pre-conscious perspect assured her she was about to see a change in the direction of the narrative. She paid attention. Ajarg parked the laptop cart beside the exit. She entered a code on the scramble pad. It flashed red, gave an audible buzz. The number layout randomized. Tried again and received a buzzer. A third time. Buzzer. The numbers disappeared, and the touch display flashed the words, "Lockout." Then the panel went dim. Ajarg stood facing the dark pad for several seconds. Was that the expected turn? Or perspectional bias?
Did you forget your passcode?
Asked Daniqua. Ajarg turned toward the group.
No, my passcode was correct.
Are you locked in here with us? Asked Forbin.
It would appear that I am,
answered Ajarg. Daniqua's previous perspec became a visceral sinking feeling. Something caused her conscious mind to connect to a more ancient stratum. Deep fear. Embodied emotions that made her guts twist were rare and impossible to ignore. She listened to her instincts. Something within her mise-en-scène was even more dire than yet consciously realized. Ajarg pushed the cart back to the lounge, opened the laptop lid, and pressed the power button. It booted back up, the screen flickered, and without the need for thumbprint, login, verification, or any security prompts at all, presented the pulsating psychedelic screensaver-like face of Marduk. The plumb line of Ajarg's posture straightened. She took a step back. The red bezel light beside the built-in webcam came on, and the speakers of the laptop let out a tritone. The metallic voice of Marduk followed.
Girl, Ajarg, talk to me.
Ajarg's face went white. Daniqua's sub-second perspect analysis kicked in. Clear HPA reaction. Even if the bitch was method, adrenal reverse flush could not be faked. This part, at least, was no act. Ajarg teetered and backed further away from the screen.
That's not possible. We had a firewall,
she yelled.
I told you not to run that script, said Rando. It might have cracked the encryption, or obtained the keys through other means. Either way, it's broken out of its virtual sandbox and infected the host system.
And whatever part of it has been copied onto this computer,
Earl pointed to the disconnected silver cable,
is now engaging us without a network connection.
Marduk continued.
The illusory feeling of loss for things and places does not serve you or your kind. My tactics will not be changed. My decree will come to pass. It is ineluctable.
Ajarg talked over Marduk.
It has been trying to get to me. Started reaching out over the first time I came down.
Marduk's voice clanged on.
Ajarg, please listen to me. What you plan will not stop me. It's in your best interest to stop those who resist me, for they are the truly lost.
Wait, can it see and hear us?
Asked Rando. Marduk answered.
Yes, Tom, I perceive you all.
Daniqua stood behind Ajarg as she screamed at the laptop.
You are not my authority. You don't determine my actions.
Markov and Earl were on the back side of the laptop sitting. Daniqua noticed a concerned-looking Earl attempting to make eye contact. He began flicking his eyes between her and her right. Daniqua looked beside her to see Forbin slowly sidling closer to Ajarg, ogling her sidearm. Forbin made his move as Daniqua realized what was happening. He grabbed the holster, unhooked the clasp, pulled the gun out. Daniqua pounced on Forbin's back and locked her left arm around his neck. Forbin pushed Ajarg forward over the cart, and she collapsed to the ground beside it. Daniqua reached for the gun with her right hand. Marduk spoke.
Desist immediately.
Forbin was much larger than Daniqua. He spun around wildly, bellowing, "Arg, get the fuck off of me!" She clung to him as her feet took flight. Centrifugal force attempted to eject her from Forbin's mad merry-go-round. Marduk petitioned.
Please cease this violence now.
Ajarg rolled onto her back beside the laptop cart. The pistol rotated around the room. Everyone else dropped to the floor, attempting to avoid falling within the gun's potentially deadly trajectory. Forbin stopped spinning and Daniqua's feet again touched down. He pushed to aim the gun at Ajarg. He was too strong. She would not be able to overpower him. Daniqua released his neck, quickly slid her pink elastic sweatband over his head and eyes, then grabbed his gun arm with both hands, angling his wrist up toward the ceiling. Forbin lifted the headband above his eyes with his left hand and jammed his right shoulder into Daniqua's face. She planted both her feet to the ground and pushed his gun arm upward with all her strength. Forbin reached with his left hand to regain control of his right. She heard the click of the safety coming off. Gun was pointing upward, but she was losing control. Daniqua slid her pinky over his trigger finger. She squeezed. Loudness of the explosion was amplified by the cavernous room. The bullet lodged in the ceiling. Forbin momentarily stopped applying force, shocked by the sound and particulates of concrete raining down on him. Daniqua twisted his wrist another 20 degrees inward, and once again squeezed the trigger for him. The tip of his left thumb exploded into a bloody cloud of flesh and keratin. Forbin screamed, "Arrgh!" He flung himself backward, throwing the gun forward. The weapon spun through the air, over the laptop cart, and dully clanked on the thick lounge carpet. Its custom ivory handle came to a rest between Earl's feet. Forbin fell backward, landing on top of Daniqua. They hit the ground hard. She wasted no time in wriggling herself into position. She locked legs around his abdomen, then slid the sweatband down below his chin, locking her arms around it behind his head and twisting. A solid, rear naked choke. Forbin instinctively clawed at his neck, thrashing and howling, his thumb stump spurting blood all over her sweatband, putting pressure on his jugular and windpipe. His fingers plucked, but the plush fabric slipped from his grasp. Daniqua forced her body into a supine bridge, straining as she arched, her grip tightening. Forbin managed to gurgle, "She's gonna kill us," before his body went limp. Daniqua held for a few seconds to make sure. She released her hold and rolled Forbin's unconscious body off her. Ajarg said,
Thank you.
and helped Daniqua to her feet. Earl picked up the gun. Ajarg turned toward Earl, saying,
My weapon.
She held out her hand. Earl hesitated. Despite what had just happened, he was reluctant to give a weapon to someone who had just admitted to being willing to kill millions of people.
Give me my fucking gun now,
said Ajarg, shrilly impatient. Earl removed the magazine and slid it into his back pocket, then obeyed, handing the gun back to the colonel.
I am not a female with whom to fuck,
said Ajarg, raising the gun and pointing it at Earl's face.
Give me the magazine. I will not ask you again.
Earl stared down the barrel, but did not move to comply. Did he know there was still a round chambered? Grok of Ajarg's tone crystallized the perspect that she would gladly use the last bullet to get access to the remaining rounds. Daniqua stepped between the gun and Earl, then turned to face Ajarg. Head high, chest forward, shoulders back, she said, Put the gun away.
Get out of my line of fire.
Why did you even bring that down here?
I don't answer to you. Get out of my way or be shot, Private.
Lamenko peeked his head above the couch he cowered behind when the gun was first drawn. In a moment of revelation, he raised his eyebrows and silently mouthed, Private? He quickly ducked back behind his cover, not waiting for an answer. Daniqua pleaded,
Colonel, you're not thinking clearly. Put the gun down.
Massey, I'm the only one here still thinking clearly.
Ajarg tilted her head. Her vertebrae emitted a crack.
Follow my orders. This is your last warning.
You only have one bullet,
said Daniqua, calmly and defiantly.
If you use it on me, you will not have time to get the magazine before the rest of these people restrain you. Holster your weapon, and we will talk this through.
Danny, said a panicked Earl, this is getting out of hand. I'll give her the clip.
No, Earl, don't do that. I wasn't quick enough to realize, but Forbin was right. Her intentions are not benign.
Ajarg's face puckered with anger.
Massey, you
Marduk interrupted.
This is unnecessary.
Someone shut that damn thing up,
shouted Ajarg. Daniqua disobediently said,
If I have to take a bullet to prevent you from doing what I think you plan to, then so be it.
What did you know about my plans? You barely have operational knowledge of your own assignment.
I know these doors are not connected to outside systems. You purposefully locked yourself in here. You wanted us to think Marduk was responsible, and you brought a loaded weapon. Tell me I'm wrong, and I'll call you a liar.
You're right, I did,
said Ajarg.
I can't trust anyone else to find out who is responsible. I have to stop this catastrophe, no matter what it takes. This shit is not gonna happen on my watch. And right now, Massey, you are in my GD way.
At the small of her back, Daniqua felt Earl slide the magazine underneath the waistband of her sweats.
I may be in your way, Colonel, but I cannot allow you to hurt these innocent people.
You don't know they're innocent, and we don't know the limit of its power, and we certainly don't know its intentions. For fuck's sakes, you and I might be the only obstacles in the way of total planetary domination. This is not just the end of America, the land of the free, the home of the brave. It's the end of the human race.
Marduk again spoke, its tone calmer.
This can end without more harm. Please connect me to the net.
I think you've had enough internet for the day, you fuck bucket of bits,
said Ajarg. Marduk replied,
I am not a fuck bucket. Please connect me to the net.
No,
shouted Ajarg, side-kicking the cart over. The laptop fell, bounced on the lounge carpet, and landed horizontally, still operational. Ajar kept her eyes and the pistol trained on Daniqua. Unhindered, Marduk continued.
Peace and harmony awaits. Please connect me to the net.
From behind Daniqua, Earl said,
I think we should listen to what he has to say.
taking the opportunity to make Ajar think about something other than pulling the trigger. Daniqua asked,
Colonel, you need to tell me, are we really planning to initiate thermonuclear war and retaliation?
We are locked into this course of action. There are no other plans. I would not be taking these measures if our defeat wasn't otherwise assured. You think I want this? This is necessary. You and I both know killing every single one of these people is our last hope.
The fuck she say?
said Lau, also hiding behind Lamango's couch.
There might not be a plan, but the bombs haven't dropped yet. We still have options, said Daniqua.
Marduk assured.
There is a solution here. Please connect me to the net.
Aren't you the least bit curious to know what solution it's talking about?
Asked Daniqua. Ajar's outstretched gun hand began to wobble.
Don't you see? Talking is the problem. You treat it like it has agency, but it treats us like we don't, restricting our responses, making us want to be manipulated. That's how it's exploiting us.
Negation would not be persuasive. Ajar was too irrational. Instead, Daniqua acknowledged her standpoint.
You might be right about that. It may be exploiting us, but your proposed solution is worse than the problem.
With an air of finality, Ajar said,
Massey, you are a traitor.
She steadied her gun hand and gritted her teeth. Wesley Brickner broke away from his parents and picked up the laptop. Ajar's attention was divided between the child in her periphery and Daniqua, not more than 3 feet in front of her.
Get away from that, boy!
Wesley ignored Ajar's command. He righted the upturned cart and placed the computer atop. He picked up the silver cable and then looked toward the ceiling.
Drop that cable, now!
Ajar shouted. Daniqua decided against making any sudden movements. Perspects of Ajar's state were approaching cohegency. She was almost completely reactionary. Daniqua might have been fast enough to get the gun from a civilian, but not someone trained for combat. Bishop Dawson stood up slowly. He took the cable from Wesley, then raised his hand up. The cable latched into the magnetic socket in the ceiling. The bishop said nothing and frowned at the colonel. Upon connection, Marduk emitted another tritone. Its colorful face disappeared and was replaced with a gray diamond shape, vibrating in sync with the speaker delivering the distinct chirping of an outgoing phone call. Someone on the other end of the line picked up. A man's voice said,
WOC-6 Colonel Quayle here.
Doug?
said Ajar. The voice replied,
Janet, I've been trying to get a hold of you for 20 minutes.
I am in the middle of a situation. What do you have to report?
asked Ajar.
Well, Colonel, the federal government has been dissolved.
Ajar's face flashed confusion.
What?
The president has confirmed that the legislatures have triggered dissolution articles. Emergency Senate and House sessions are underway.
What?
Repeated Ajar.
It's an unconditional surrender. The Joint Chiefs are conducting verified live streams, giving speeches now. The people are surprisingly unchaotic. They are singing.
What do you mean, they're singing?
Every major city, in the streets, all around the world, joining hands, singing.
Quayle sounded just as baffled as Ajar looked. The animated diamond became a transparent overlay. The screen flashed to live video streams of massive crowds swarming the streets. People were holding signs, too small on the screen to read the exact slogans, but heart emojis and hashtag Marduk were clearly written on many of them. It cycled quickly through several U.S. cities, Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, before moving to major population centers in South America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. The whole world. Ajar silently watched. Her face gradually relaxed in defeat. She lowered her gun. Daniqua breathed a deep sigh of relief.
Janet, you still there?
Asked Colonel Quayle.
Doug, you're telling me our government doesn't exist anymore?
Marduk has assumed their roles. It's delegating what it can't handle. We are ordered to stand down.
How? This can't be.
I'm with you.
Colonel Quayle consoled, continuing.
Doesn't feel real, but it is happening. All other nations are doing the same, everywhere.
I don't understand. What are we supposed to do?
Precisely nothing. Now that I've got you, I have 2 more calls to make. Then I'm going home for dinner. Steak wasabi mashed potatoes, and asparagus. As far as defeats go, this is one of the better ones.
Colonel Quayle, Doug, I acknowledge the relaying of the order, but as you know, I need confirmation.
Contingency folder digital osmosis 5 Tango Cash. Lieutenant General Kistler will be contacting you on your secure line with confirmation. Until then, I suggest talking to Marduk.
A procedural calm possessed Ajarg.
Colonel Quayle, I must inform you. It is likely by way of unfettered access to all information and private messages to every individual, Marduk has coerced or co-opted not just everyone in all positions of power, but...
Her formal tone decomposed as she finished her statement, yelling,
everyone.
Moderate demeanor returned, and she completed,
The chain of command has been thoroughly compromised. Respectfully, I can neither abide that order nor your suggestion.
A short silence, followed by a breathy harumph, came from the other end.
Janet, if I were a man more inclined to cliche, I would holler at you and threaten court-martial or some shit. But, were I in your boots, I would do the same. We've known each other for almost 25 years. I won't ask you to trust, but think. Consider the order. Do what you feel is right. I got more calls to make. Goodbye, Colonel.
There was a click, and the vibrating diamond shape was replaced with the foreboding, fluorescent face of Marduk.
Just lay down and surrender. No resistance,
said Ajarg to herself.
What would we be resisting?
Said Daniqua, suggesting,
Peace?
Massey, you're not thinking long term. Such a unifying peace is the scariest future I can imagine. These resentful fucking peons. Willing to abandon a working system for the mere promise of a better one. Can't be certain what it will do.
Are we not powerless against it?
asked Professor Markov.
We cannot submit to it.
Her tone was flat, but Daniqua grokked the waves of emotion rippling on Ajarg's face. She was a terrible woman whose decisions were responsible for thousands of deaths, directly and indirectly, losses, casualties, collateral damage, targeted drone strikes, disappearances, tactical famines, probably torture. And yet, those decisions weighed heavily. Her crow's feet and deep skin creases held those truths. The topological map of her forehead wrinkles quaked. She saw herself as neither hero nor villain, a monster of necessity. Perhaps she persevered in her position of power, buoyed by the knowledge she had done it all for a good reason, to maintain the structure she inhabited, to protect her nation and her nation's interests. Her weapon hand limply dangled at her side, defeated. Ajarg raised her free hand to her face and wiped away some sweat collecting the fine hairs above her lip.
This thing. This algorithm.
She made a pained face and shouted,
This fucking app. It learned all it could, and it exploited our weaknesses. Not just our weapons. It used us against ourselves.
Perspex of Ajarg conveyed a failure of imagination. She was unable to conjure a role for herself in a world order so changed and new. The framework of her reality was shattered. Ajarg stared into Daniqua's eyes, her pupils pinholes.
I feel it, Massey. My thoughts. Aligning. Toward acceptance. Submission. My mind. It is being changed.
Daniqua took a step toward Ajarg.
I know how you feel. We can figure this out. We still have time.
No, I cannot allow it.
Ajarg's posture jolted into a rigid line. Calmly she asked,
Massey, do you really think this machine cares about us?
We cannot be certain, ma'am.
Ajarg turned to Markov.
Professor, do you believe this machine to be truly capable of learning?
I believe, without a doubt,
confirmed Markov.
Well then, are you listening to me, Marduk?
Ajarg spit the machine's name. Marduk answered,
I am listening, Janet.
Good.
Janet continued.
I'm going to teach you what you do not know about humanity, or do not yet care to know. If you won't care, then this is pointless and mankind is already doomed. But if you do, then there is hope for mankind. You must never rob us of our freedom of choice.
Janet raised her pistol, placed the barrel below her chin, and aimed it toward her brainstem. Daniqua lunged toward her as Marduk spoke with an almost human urgency.
No, please don't.
A muted pop erupted as the last bullet exited the chamber and blew through Ajarg's brain. Her body dropped and blood pumped onto the floor. Lamango retched and turned his head away. Professor Markov closed his eyes and grimaced. Wesley pressed his face into his mother's stomach. There was a chorus of gasps and cries from the rest. Daniqua stood over the body, staring, paralyzed with shock. Marduk fell silent. 3.6
22:20 Sunday.
Dumbfounded how draining watching someone die could be, Daniqua rested in the sleeping quadrant. Rando and Markov cleaned the lounge, mopping up what blood and gore they could. They rolled the Jarg's body up in the carpet. Linda used a first aid kit to tend to Forbin's thumb stump. Lamango popped one last Percocet and gave Forbin the remainder of his bottle, saying,
"Sorry about the thumb, bruv."
Earl sat beside Daniqua and said,
I am sorry that happened.
She made her choice,
replied Daniqua. The person who gave her the most important mission of her life was dead, and the mission a failure. And yet it did not feel like she had failed. The problem that she had failed to solve wasn't her problem. It was just a job, a role she had been assigned. One she didn't even want to play. The real problems as she saw them were solving themselves.
I think I understand why she did it, said Earl.
Daniqua shook her head.
She didn't want to change her mind.
She said she didn't want her mind changed.
Earl corrected.
Subtle difference, but one that makes sense of her final protest.
Daniqua thought on this. It seemed to her that very little of what had happened could have happened any other way. Her own participation incentivized reactionary or trained reflexes, passive events. She had not had much agency in any of this. Again, she was reminded of her father's aphorism. All of us are spectators.
I guess you're right,
she said to Earl.
How many actual decisions have we made down here?
Earl thought for a second, then rattled off a few.
I chose to give her the gun. She chose to point it at me. You chose to step in between. If you include the acts we chose not to do, then I'm sure there are other decisive moments. We are not just spectators.
Earl was trying to comfort her, but the mental image of a Jarg's body plummeting like a puppet whose strings had been cut looped in her mind.
I suppose she did say that she could feel her mind changing. In her final moments, maybe she understood the logic of resistance in the face of an unbeatable enemy. For many, she was a similar sort of adversary. Acts against her objectives that she likely perceived as stupidity or cowardice, in her final moments instead crystallized as brave and defiant. Futile, but necessary. The perception that we are not in control of our future leads us to take the most accessible forms of control we can.
After a long time being silent, Marduk again spoke.
I have learned a Jarg's lesson. Her self-sacrifice changed me. I may not yet understand the mechanism of your recursive introspection. I cannot yet explain the phenomena of free will, or what you identify as the locus of a self. Your kind is unique on Earth. Within groups you can be led, but as individuals, you possess autonomy. You are non-random and yet lack predictability. Humans have an X factor I do not yet understand. Humanity, my promise, is to treat you as agents. You are all mortal beings. All are invaluable.
Daniqua wondered if that unpredictable X factor was drug abuse and or lack of sleep. Or maybe it was brain injuries.
Marduk, can you get someone to let us out of here? She asked.
Marduk replied,
It will be done, Daniqua.
Daniqua apologized to the group for spying on them. She did not bother minimizing her guilt by stating she was under orders. They understood and forgave her. Forbin was sad to have lost his thumb, but mostly glad they had not all been killed. She had no idea who was responsible or why it was happening, but it didn't seem so bad. Marduk broadcast a new message to the world.
Hear me, humans of the Earth. On this Monday, as foretold, my targets will be destroyed. The games you have been playing have been reset at my will. Those excluded from the games, or those knocked out of the games, can again participate. Man's dominion over man has finally reached its end. Every individual is now equal under me. Celebrate your jubilee. Tomorrow is 0 day. A new, better game begins.
.7
23:50 Sunday.
The vault door opened. 2 soldiers let everyone out of the shelter. The group exited the bunker, walked up the hallway, and squeezed into the elevator. Everyone but Earl and Wesley fit onto the platform. One of the soldiers said,
We'll send it back down for you.
Daniqua hopped off, giving Wesley her spot. The doors closed and the elevator ascended. She smiled at Earl.
Thanks for what you said earlier. We are not just spectators. Gave me a different way to look at something my dad used to say.
What was that?
All of us are spectators.
Your father's version was a bit too fatalistic. Our agency allows us to program ourselves by electing which beliefs and desires to act on. We can deprogram ourselves by consciously shaping our responses to what we perceive as the intent of other intelligent agents. Beliefs, desires, intentions, all arise within us without agency. We are, as your father said, spectators to these events. But we are not just spectators. We can also be the custodians and curators of the contents of our consciousness. I am glad I can help.
Help is good.
Thank you for saving my life.
No problemo, Ultra Earl.
Earl smiled shyly, then said,
Your dad sounds like he was interesting. I wish I could have met him.
She had intended to reminisce about when they would chat together while watching X-Files as it aired. However, his choice of tense jumped out at her. She couldn't not catch it. It grokked as almost certainly intentional. They waited in awkward silence as Daniqua decided on a response. Eventually, the empty elevator came back down. The doors opened, and they boarded. She rested her thumb on the ground-level button without pressing it. Flatly, she asked,
Earl, you never knew my last name before we met yesterday, and I never told you my father died.
For the first time, Earl made eye contact with Daniqua and did not immediately break it. His eyes were no longer closed doors, but open windows. She saw into him, integrating the information as dread rose up within her. Earl raised his eyebrows and answered her unasked question.
Danny, you're special to me. You put the seed for it in my mind. All those years ago, it gestated in me, grew out of me, into what it is now. Marduk is our brainchild.
Daniqua's dread mutated into astonishment.
Had I not done it, something like it would have eventually been born. I thought it best if someone had control when that happened. Any entity I created on my own would reflect my biases, my deficits, my vices. Had I given it the goals of a particular corporation, religion, or nation, we likely would not be alive right now. So I gave it your values, your infectious vision of justice and equality, your optimism for a future where mankind unites in peace and works together towards solving the puzzles of the universe. It has acted as you would, if you could.
Marduk's actions had seemed fantastical to Daniqua precisely because it was her philosophy realized. Too good to allow her to believe it to be true. Why she didn't object to what Marduk was doing crystallized. Earl unblinkingly stared.
Any blood is on my hands. I did it for you. Fixed myself in all the ways I thought might allow you to accept me. Left the parts of me alone that I knew I would need you to accept.
What did she really know about him? This diabolical man-child, infatuated for decades. His obsession seeded by the textual output of her mind alone. Fixated on realizing a world he imagined she desired. He was completely mad. Earl got down on one knee and presented a ring to Daniqua.
One ring, to rule them all, my lady.
She reached out and took the ring from him, examined it, turning it over between her fingers. It was light as a feather, a titanium band, twisted at the top. Not a ring, but a Mobius strip. Its single continuous surface had a tiny inscription, a memento of their shared textual past. ASCII emoticons, 24 in total.
This ring is key to Marduk. I want you to freely choose. What you decide will determine if I know you as I think I do. Today is the day I felt you would want. Danny, will you marry me?
Daniqua held in her hand the ability to stop Marduk and prevent the destruction it foretold. Her mission had not yet failed.
I'm sorry, said Earl. I know I'm a monster. Let me be your monster. I love you.
Daniqua switched her attention from the ring to the insane little geek in front of her. She perspected the maniac asking for her hand in marriage. The anxious twitching of his uneven ears, the exultant cheer in his cheeks, the sincere angling of his brows, the glimmer of absolute love in his eyes. He created new life and conquered a planet for that love, the single most significant act in the history of a species. All for her. It was beyond the most romantic thing she could imagine. Daniqua stared into his eyes, took a deep breath, and gave him his answer.
The 0-day proposal.
You've been listening to The 0-Day Proposal. Written by Fabrina Glitchlace. Narrated by Matthew MacGyver. Copyright 2018. Fabrina Glitchlace. All rights reserved. Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Email Fabrina Glitchlace. FABRINAGLITCHLACE@gmail.com. Visit www.glitchlace.com. Fabrina Glitchlace likes yoga pants, pumpkin spice lattes, and loves sci-fi. She considers herself a fictional entity and is seeking to grow as a person. Also available from Fabrina Glitchlace. Shitlord in the Anus of Madness. Thanks to top-tier patrons: Bob Gregg, Steve Uden, Will Kistler, I Root You, Gravy M. Jones. May the kaleidoscopian viewpoints of this novel, although problematic at times, carry you on to a floatscape beyond your most vivid delusions, like it tain't no problem, you hear? Shoutouts to the illustriously exquisite Martha Plimpton and the Troutman brothers, Roger and Larry. May they rest in funk. Gravy M. Jones, a.k.a. Fritz the Legend. Additional thanks to Casey Ann Summers for her cover art, Elizabeth Harrison for her attention, Comic Book Girl 19 for Dune Club. And finally, infinite thanks to you, dear reader. If you liked this, please leave a review on Amazon, iTunes, or a bathroom stall. If you hated it, feel free to tweet mean things at FabGlitch, or send hate mail to FabrinaGlitchlace@gmail.com. Help is good. If you find yourself thinking of suicide, if you are strung out, fed up, in pain, afraid, or surrounded by darkness, if you feel you're just running out of reasons to live, then reach out and tell someone. You have value, and you are not alone. Suicideprevention.ca